Hello, my name is Garchon Pro, and I've been Challenger since Set 2. This most recent PvE cycle, I've been spending a lot of time playing in high elo Challenger in-houses, practicing versus some of the best players in the world. I feel like I have a pretty strong grasp on what comps are good in Set 9, as well as how to play them. So what I'd like to do today is share that knowledge with you, and teach you every comp I know in Set 9. I will start with the 4-cost oriented comps, then go to the 3-costs, the 2-costs, and finish out with the 1-cost comps. If you want to see a specific comp, the timestamps are linked in the description. Now, if you are a newer player, I would highly recommend watching this next section, as I'm going to go through some of the key terminology that you'll need to fully understand this video. If you're a more experienced player, feel free to skip to the first comp. First, I'd like to go over a couple definitions. Hyper roll is when you roll all your gold at 3-1 level 4 to hit 3-star 1 costs. Slow rolling is when you stay above 50 gold at a certain level, while rolling to 50 gold each turn until you hit your 3-star units, or are super low HP and need to roll down to hit them. Typically, Hyper Roll is played for 1-cost carries, but usually not fully. Most of the time, people will roll till about 30 gold on level 4, and then go to level 5 and slow roll there. Fast 7 and Fast 8 are when you push for level 7 and level 8, and then roll only then. Fast 9 is pretty rare. In Fast 9, you typically will just go immediately to level 9, barely rolling at level 7, level 8, and just pushing towards level 9. This doesn't happen very often, however. If I say roll down, it means spend all of your gold at a certain turn. So for instance, a Fast 7 comp may want to go to level 7 on 4-1 and roll down to 0 gold to hit their board. A reroll comp is a comp that involves 3-starring your units. This is contrasted with a non-reroll comp where you're typically playing around like a 2-star 4-cost. And then best in slot, or BIS, is just the best possible combination of 3 items for a unit. In addition, here are some good abbreviations to know if you're newer to the game. I will be using the proper names of every item in this video, but these are good abbreviations to know in general. Without further ado, let's get to the first comp. First, we have Sorcerer Lux. Now, the idea of this comp is we're going to be playing around Sorcerers and carrying Lux. This is the default variation I like to go for with 4 Bastion and 4 Sorcerer, essentially just running Lux, Ahri, Taric, and Swain for the 4 Sorcerer. And then we're simply just filling out Jarvan because he's a broken unit, gives a Strategist as well. And then Shen is always a play here due to the fact that he gives Bastion. And then in this variation, we're running Poppy and Kassadin. The Poppy and Kassadin can be swapped out. The core is these 6 units, but these 2 slots can be swapped out. But in this variation here, I'm just running Poppy, fill out Demacia, and then Kassadin to fill out the 4 Bastion. Of course, if you hit a Cassante, you can drop Kassadin for Cassante as well. In terms of itemization for this comp, you always want to be going 2 items on Lux, and then either 1 or 3 items on Jarvan, due to the fact that you want the Demacia Radiant item to be going onto your Lux and not your Jarvan typically. In terms of best Lux items, I think Jewel Gauntlets are best item, but other good Lux items include Gunblade, Blue Buff, Shojin, Giant Slayer, Guard Breaker, and then Deathcap and Archangels are acceptable as well. I would make sure you have at least 1 damage item, so like don't go something like Gunblade plus Blue Buff. You can have like Gunblade, Blue Buff, or Shojin, but you should only have 1 of those in the slot. The other slot should be a damage item. In terms of Jarvan itemization, Jarvan's best item by far is going to be Protector's Vow. It's just going to allow him to cast really quickly, and it's going to make him a lot tankier, so it's by far his best item. He has a bunch of other good items though. Warmogs, Brambles, Stoneplate, Dragon's Claw are all good. Redemption is solid as well. He can also hold other utility items. Sunfire has a decent hold on Jarvan. Sometimes though, I'll throw my Sunfire on my Swain instead. And then same thing with Spark. A lot of times I'll throw the Spark on the Swain instead of my Jarvan. Just due to the fact that maybe I want to go like triple tank item on the Jarvan. But completely fine on your Jarvan as well. You typically want to either have Spark or Shiv in this comp. Shiv will typically just go on Ahri, one of the 2. What you can actually do is just hold items on Swain. A lot of times in mid game, I'll put my items on Swain and just keep them there instead of on Jarvan, because I will typically just not sell a Swain 2. Swain 2 is very tanky, so it's worth it to keep it on him a lot. A lot of the times I'll actually throw my items on Kassadin as well. Kassadin 2 is actually quite strong in the late game, so I love having my tank items on Kassadin. The reason I have this positioning right here is the idea is Lux is going to be on the same side as the Kassadin, and Lux a lot of times is going to get a kill really early onto the fight, which is going to clear open the side. The rest of the enemy front line is going to walk over to your clump on the right side, and it's going to open up the left side for the Kassadin to walk backwards, and he could potentially go onto the enemy backline and start ulting onto them, which is going to be doing the disarm onto their carry, which is extremely powerful. So I'm a big fan of just having the Lux and the Kassadin kind of isolated like this. Of course, you can mirror it like so, and it does the exact same thing. If you have a Sorcerer +1, I really like to play a board like this. We're going to drop out of the 4 Bastion, lose a bit of that front line, but we're going to have a lot more damage playing this 6 Sorcerer. Of course, just throwing in Velkoz, and now that we're running Velkoz, we'd rather run Sona than Kassadin just because the Multicaster is really good, buff up the Sona and the Velkoz. I really like to have Sorcerer Spat on the Sona, so keep that in mind. This is typically the variation I like to play when you have the Sorcerer +1. Theoretically, you can play some sort of Sorcerer board without the Sorcerer +1. In that scenario, what you probably have to do is drop the Shen for like an Orianna or a Malzahar. I don't think it's the greatest because you're losing a lot of unit quality. Shen is a significantly better unit than like Orianna, for example. But theoretically, it is actually fine to play some sort of 6 sorcerer board, especially like as a transition, right? Maybe you're just playing a bunch of sorcerers in the early game, and so you play some sort of 6 sorcerer board by like dropping the Shen on this board, but then eventually you try and pivot into, a more capped out version of the comp. This here is a version of the comp that you can play when you don't have Ahri and you don't want to play around the 4 Bastion. Essentially here we're just playing Velkoz instead of the Ahri, and then Sona, of course, due to the fact that we're not playing around 4 Bastion, and then we get Multicaster with the Velkoz, and then your last slot just becomes an Invoker unit like so. One other variation you can play is this one right here. This one's really good if you're sitting here with like a Rageblade and you want to play around Azir in this Lux composition. What we do is we play the Azir. It's going to be nice because it's going to give our Lux a bit more damage due to the fact that we're going to be able to put in 3 Strategist. Also gives us a bit more frontline. Of course, in this variation here, we're running Galio for the Invoker. Goes nicely with the Shen's Invoker right here. So this is another variation you can play where you're dual carrying the Lux and the Azir if you have an excess of AP items. Of course, typically speaking, your spare AP items will be going on Ahri, ideally in a board like this. Of course, with this board right here, if you want to cap out, what you can potentially do is drop the Poppy and the Caston. What you may want to do is drop the Poppy for Galio due to the fact that he's going to be giving you Invoker. Which will just essentially free up this Caston slot for whatever you want. Maybe if you have like an Ahri 2 with items, you put in 3 Ionia to buff up your Ahri, or maybe you just run a generic flex unit, like anything. Like you could theoretically even just throw in an Azir and play this board right here, even without Azir items, should be decent. But you could just play a random flex unit like a Sona as well, should be acceptable. Maybe play a Heimerdinger because you want some of the Heimerdinger utility. So a board like this should be completely acceptable as well. Just a note, Ahri's best item is definitely going to be blue buff. Ahri really likes 1 mana item. Blue buff and Shojin are both good, just due to the fact that it's going to allow her to cast more, mana reave more enemies, and just get to that 3rd cast and wipe the enemy board. One other thing is that if you have Sorcerer +2, you should always be trying to play 8 Sorcerer. 8 Sorcerer is extremely powerful. So if you have Sorcerer +2, like you have another Sorcerer +1, just throw it on somebody. So like let's say we throw it on the Jarvan right here. And definitely just drop this and try and play the 8 Sorcerer. 8 Sorcerer is extremely powerful, does a lot of damage. It's a little awkward to fit 8 Sorcerer though if you don't have the Sorcerer +2 and you only have Sorcerer +1, because then you would have to drop out of Demacia. But if you have like 2 Sorcerer emblems, highly recommend playing an 8 Sorcerer board like this. In terms of the best legend for this composition, I think that Veigar is very good. Being able to just have Jewel Lotus or free is extremely powerful, means you don't have to build Jewel Gauntlet, and you're buffing up the damage on all your units a lot because they already have a lot of raw IP. Just make sure you're not building Jewel Gauntlet if you have Jewel Lotus. In addition, Urf is pretty good. There's quite a few different good emblems you can get from Urf. If you get, a Sorcerer emblem, you can of course play the 6 Sorcerer comp I was talking about. A Bastion emblem allows you to fit in the 4 Bastion without even having to play the Kassadin. Strategist emblem is always going to be good in this composition. Ionia emblem is actually a bit interesting due to the fact that you can fit 3 Ionia for free to buff up your Ahri if you manage to hit her. Demacia emblem is good. You can drop the last Demacia unit, or you could even theoretically play some sort of 5 Demacia board like so. Like we play the Galio right here, and then we just go into probably like a Sona. And if we have Demacia +1, this would be 5 Demacia. So this comp really has a lot of different emblems it can use, so Urf is quite good with it. In terms of the best augments for this composition, of course, the Sorcerer augments are going to be really good. Overcharge Mana Front is extremely powerful. It basically just makes Lux double cast instantaneously, and she just does a ton of damage. Of course, your generic AP augments such as Magic Wand are going to be really good. Morning Light is very good. It's the one that heals your Bastion units. Definitely play the 4 Bastion variation if you have Morning Light to get the max value out of it. I think Know Your Enemy is extremely powerful with Lux due to the fact that she typically gets a kill very early on into the fight, which is going to allow you to proc the Know Your Enemy effect, which makes you do increased damage to units after the first enemy dies each combat. So that's just really good. And Fusion's just good, just allows you to cast more. I think Martyr is quite good in a board like this, simply due to the fact that you have a lot of frontliners, right? Especially if we're playing that 4 Bastion version I was showing earlier. If we play a variation like this, we have a lot of frontliners, so as soon as one of these frontliners dies, Martyr is going to heal all of them back up. So next we have 7 Demacia Lux. Now this is a comp I really like to play when I have the Demacia +1, whether that be a Demacia Heart or a Demacia Emblem. Just due to the fact that the unit quality is going to be a lot lower if you don't have the +1, you're going to have to run Garen over Shen, which is just going to lower the quality of your board, right? Shen's giving you Bastion and Invoker and is just a better unit than the Garen. But you could theoretically run it with the Garen as well. That being said, if you want to play around Demacia and you don't have a Demacia +1, I highly recommend playing a board more like this right here. Playing around the 4 Sorcerer, 5 Demacia, just giving your Demacia buff to the Lux and the Jarvan. This board is pretty acceptable as well. You're playing around the Sorcerer, so you're getting a bit more damage, and this is completely fine to play. Back to the 7th Demacia though, in terms of itemization, what we're going to prioritize is Lux items here. I think Jewel Gauntlet is Lux's best item. In addition, Gunblade, Shojin, Blue Buff are all very good. Giant Slayer, Guardbreaker are great as well. Deathcap and Archangels are fantastic as well. So those are all good options for your Lux. Next, you're going to prioritize Jarvan itemization. Protector's Vow is by far his best item. If you can get it, it's fantastic. If you can't, it's not the end of the world though. He has a bunch of other items he can use as well. Warmonks is really good. Bramble, Dragon's Claw, and Stoneplate are all solid as well. In addition, Redemption is interesting on Jarvan due to the fact that Redemption is going to give him mana, which will allow him to cast faster, but he just jump away from your team, which won't allow the Redemption to proc onto your other units as often. So there's a bit of give and take there with the Redemption on Jarvan. He can also hold like a Spark or a Sunfire as well. And then finally, you're going to put your spare AP items on Sona. Sona could just use whatever AP items. That being said, I think Shojin is one of her best items. It's going to allow her to cast a lot more and buff the attack speed of your team. Morello is fantastic on Sona due to the fact that she targets the largest clump of enemies, which means she's usually hitting a lot of stuff and applying Morello. I think Morello in this comp is actually going to be better than Sunfire if you can get the Morello on Sona. But Sona can honestly just use random AP items as well. If you have like a Shiv, you can throw it on her. A Deathcap or an Archangel spare, you can throw it on her as well. You can even throw like Chalice on Sona to buff up your Lux. That's completely acceptable as well. In addition, Rapid Fire Cannon and Rage Blade are not bad on Sona too, due to the fact that her spell scales off of her attack speed. The attack speed bonus she gives your team actually is a % of her attack speed. So giving Sona more attack speed is completely fine. One other thing to note with this comp is that Kayle does shred once you're level 6. That being said, it is okay to build like a Spark or a Shiv, just due to the fact that they might hit different units than the Kayle, or the Kayle might die. But this means that you don't need to have like a Shiv or a Spark in this comp, because Kayle can give you a bit of that shred. In addition, if you go level 9, you can simply just throw in a random unit. You could just throw in like a Sena or something, completely valid. Another thing you can do is drop the Shen, and you can just put in Ahri and Velkoz, or Ahri and Taric, and play a board like this, and you're still going to have the 7 Demacia at level 9, but now you have the 4 Sorcerer. Just do a lot of damage, throw spare items on the Ahri. This is completely valid. One other thing is that Sona 3 is a legitimate win condition for this composition. If you get the Sona 3, I would highly recommend trying to play around Velkoz on this board. So maybe at level 8, you play something like this with the 3 Sorcerer. It's a little awkward. Maybe, instead of this, you can drop the Swain and play the Shen over the Swain. This might be fine as well. But then at level 9, your board would just simply look like the board I showed earlier, except instead of Ahri. So you would be playing a board like this, because if you get the Sona 3, you really want to have that 2 Multicaster in to buffer up a bunch. So this is also completely valid way to win the game if you get a Sona 3. In terms of the best legend, I really like Veigar due to the fact that he's basically going to give you a Jewel Gauntlet for free. Just make sure you're not building Jewel Gauntlet if you have Veigar, and you take the Jewel Lotus. That being said, you can also take Urf for a higher likelihood at a Demacia +1 or a Sorcerer +1, because of course if you have a Sorcerer +1, this can just be your board at level 8. You're going to have 4 Sorcerer, 7 Demacia, if you also have the Demacia +1, of course. But then even if you don't have both, you can play a comp like this. Sorcerer +1 should still be strong in this board as well. You can just play a flex unit over one of these spots. Maybe you get to drop the Taric and play the Shen for Invoker. So Sorcerer +1 should be strong here as well. Sorcerer emblem typically just goes on Sona. In terms of the best augments, the Demacia augments are obviously going to be very good. Standard AP augments such as Jeweled Lotus and Magic Wand are very good. I think Ascension's pretty good in this comp because you have a lot of tankiness due to the innate armor and MR from the Demacia. In addition, I actually think that Know Your Enemy is quite good in Lux comps due to the fact that Lux has a lot of single target burst, which will allow her to kill a unit really quickly and get the Know Your Enemy buff, which is going to mean that your team is doing bonus % damage after the first enemy dies each combat. In addition, I think that Martyr is quite good in this comp as well because you have a lot of tanky units due to the Demacia buff. So whenever one of them dies, they're going to heal up all those other tanky units, which is really powerful. And then again, of course, your standard AP augments are going to be really good as well. Like Infusion is going to be solid to allow your units to cast more. The final note for this comp is you want to make sure that you don't have 3 items on your Lux, Sona, or Jarvan. You want to have just 2 items on them due to the fact that you want to be giving them the Radiant item from the Demacia. So make sure you're just going 2 items on Lux, 2 items Jarvan, 2 items Sona. They should be able to each get a free Radiant item, which is going to make them a lot stronger. The next we have Shurima Azir. Another thing with Shurima Azir is you really want to be playing around 7 Shurima, just due to the fact that 7 Shurima is significantly stronger than 3 and 5 Shurima. Just getting that proc at the start of the fight is insanely impactful, makes your whole team tankier, makes your whole team do a lot more damage. So it's really just a significantly stronger comp than playing around like 5 Shurima. The idea here is we're going to playing around Azir as our carry and Jarvan as our tank. We want to be rolling on level 7, level 8. Either of them is fine. Rolling on 7 for this comp is fine because Jarvan and Azir are not that hard to hit, but rolling on 8 is good as well because we do have potential hits like Asante there, and it's a bit easier to 2-star everything on our front line. In terms of itemization, you want to make sure you have a Rage Blade for Azir. It's by far his best item. And then for his other 2 items, you have a bunch of options. Shiv is really good. If you don't have a Shiv, I like putting Spark on the front line. Gunblade is really good as well. Deathcap is good. Archangels is good. Giant Slayer, Guardbreaker are good options as well. You can even go like double Rage Blade. A Rapid Fire Cannon is a decent option as well. Jewel Gauntlet isn't the greatest, but is fine as well, especially if you have another AP source like a Deathcap. Like something like Rage Blade, Deathcap, Jewel Gauntlet should be completely acceptable as well. Your tank items are going to go on Jarvan. His best item for sure is going to be Val, but you can just go stuff like Warmogs, Sunfire, Dragon's Claw, Bramble Vest, Stoneplate, Redemption, even like Double Vow is fine as well. So all those options are great for Jarvan. You can go spare items on your Nasus. Nasus can take spare tank items or spare AD items. Those are completely fine. And Cassante can take spare tank items as well. Val Cassante is just really, really strong. So if you can get an extra Val, love putting it on Cassante. He's going to be a beast with it. This is really just your board right here. If you have the Shurima +1, you're probably going to be dropping Taliyah here, and you're going to be playing Sejuani typically. For the more frontline, something like this. The best legend for this composition is definitely going to be Vladimir. This is simply due to the fact that all of Vladimir's augments are very good for this comp. This comp is pretty tanky. Vladimir's going to make you a lot tankier. You have a lot of backloaded damage with the Rage Blade anyways, so the Ascension from Vladimir is really, really powerful for this comp because you just stack up with the Rage Blade, and Azir isn't doing a lot of damage till his 3rd cast anyways, so the Ascension just synergizes really well with Azir anyways. In addition, Urf is actually fine as well if you want to potentially get the Shurima +1, because Shurima +1 is a huge spike rate. Sejuani is a significantly better unit than Taliyah, so being able to get that Shurima +1 is extremely, extremely valuable. One other variation for the comp is if you can manage to go level 9 and start capping around legendaries, you can actually drop out of the 7 Shurima and play a board that looks something like this right here, playing around the 3 Strategist with a bunch of good legendary units in our backline. We can throw spare AP items on Ahri and kind of duo carry the Azir and the Ahri here. So this is a completely viable option as well if you can start capping out and play these high value units. But the normal 7 Shurima board is a lot more reliable to hit on like a level 7 roll down or like a quick level 8 roll down as well. In terms of the best augments for this composition, augments that make you a bit tankier are good. So stuff like Transfusion's good. I already talked about Ascension. Ascension is going to be good as well. Of course, Strategist +1 and Shurima +1 are great as well. Harm Assist is really good. Azir's typically just going to be sitting in the backline nice and safe, so he'll be able to get a bunch of extra damage. But Azir does like a bit of healing as well due to the fact that sometimes Azir will get splashed a bit, so Harm Assist is a great option as well. Of course, Magic Wand is great, just more AP for your team. I think Martyr is another good option as well, just due to the fact that you have a lot of tanky units. Again, I like Martyr on boards that have a lot of different frontline units. That way, when one of them dies, it heals up the rest of the frontline. So that is a great option as well. So next we have Freljord Aphelios. Now with this comp, you typically want to be rolling on level 7, level 8. Ideally level 8 due to the fact that Aphelios 1 is somewhat weak, but Aphelios 2 actually feels quite good. So you really want to be getting to that level 8, so that way you can reliably hit the Aphelios 2. In terms of itemization, you want to make sure you have a Rage Blade +2 on your Aphelios. Deathblade is good, Giant Slayer is good, Guardbreaker is good, Runon's Hurricane is good. So those are all acceptable options for the Aphelios. Sejuani can really just use whatever tank items you have, whether it be like Warmogs, Sunfire, Bramble Vest, Redemption, Stoneplate, Dragon's Claw, or Protector's Vow. All of those are completely acceptable. In terms of this board here, where our core is really going to be the Sejuani, Lys, Ashe, and Aphelios for the 4 Freljord. And then we typically want to fill out with Scion for the Bruiser, so you can run another Bruiser over Scion before you have the Scion. And then Taric is really nice due to the fact that it'll give us the Targun for the Aphelios, buff up his healing, and then buff up Sejuani's shield. Shen, of course, just fits the synergies perfectly here, giving Invoker and Bastion. Senna here is just a flex spot. The Senna can really be anything you want. Jarvan is a great option instead of the Senna as well. You could even play like a Heimerdinger here. It is completely acceptable. Or you could just play like any random unit as long as it's upgrade and makes sense. Maybe like a second Sejuani, maybe like a second Scion. Those are all completely fine. One positioning trick you can do with this comp is actually solo frontline the Sejuani. The idea here is that way the enemy team will clump around the Sejuani, and she'll be able to hit everything with her ultimate, and it'll clump them up for a better Aphelios ultimate. This is really only good though if you have a Sejuani 2 with 3 items. Otherwise, she's just going to die immediately and not be able to do anything, so keep that in mind. One other variation of this composition is to play 4 Bruiser. This variation has a bit less utility, but a bit more frontline. I think you're playing a bit lower quality unit here. I would highly recommend pivoting into this version of the comp due to the fact that the unit quality just ends up being a bit higher. But this version of the comp is completely fine as well if you want to play around that 4 Bruiser. just make the front line nice and tanky. So this is an option to keep in mind as well. Of course, if you have a Bruiser +1, what you can simply do is just drop the Sona, play a third Bruiser, and now you have 4 Bruiser, and this variation would make perfect sense with that as well. In terms of legends, I really like to play this from Aurelion Sol, just due to the fact that you really want to be level 8 to make sure you hit that Sejuani to Aphelios too. You really want to hit both of them. They're huge spikes. It's hard to hit both at level 7. So I really like Aurelion Sol to guarantee that I get to level 8 quickly and can hit my stuff and then maybe go level 9 and cap out there. In terms of the best augments, Freljord +1 is one of the best ones you can hit due to the fact that 4 Freljord is extremely powerful. Just adding in that extra CC makes your comp a lot better. Of course, Bruiser +1, really good as well. Harm Assist is quite good due to the fact that Aphelios is you can just sit back here and already heal back to full, so he's going to do a bunch of extra damage with Harm Assist. In addition, AD and attack speed augments are great as well, so those are all good options. One other variation of the Aphelios comp is you can actually play around Lockets plus Targon. The Targon will actually buff up the power of the Lockets. So you can go for like 2 or 3 Lockets and play a board similar to this right here. So if you're sitting here with a bunch of Lockets, this is actually a viable way to play Aphelios, is a board like this. So next we have 4 Deadeye, Aphelios plus Urgot. The idea of this composition is we're going to be dual carrying Aphelios and Urgot. Again, you want to be rolling on level 7, level 8 to try and hit your board right here. In terms of itemization, we're first going to prioritize Aphelios items. Rageblade is really good. And then for our 2 other items, Deathblade is good, Giant Slayer is good, Guardbreaker is good, and Runaan's Hurricane are all good. Next, we're actually going to prioritize Urgot item. Now, Urgot needs at least 1 healing item typically. Bloodthirster is by far the best, although Hand of Justice is somewhat acceptable, but really you want at least 1 Bloodthirster, and then 2 other items. You typically want to be going more for tank stats with the Urgot. So something like double Bloodthirster is really good on Urgot, double Titans is really good as well, due to the fact that it's going to give damage and tank stats. You can even go raw tank items like a Warmongs is completely fine on Urgot as well. You want to be frontlining the Urgot and making sure that he's nice as tanky as possible. And then, of course, you're going to be giving the Chemtech enhancement from Zaun to the Urgot. And then if you have spare tank items, they'll typically just go on your Sejuani right here. We'll fill out the board with the 3 Freljord just because it's a really strong trait. Of course, we're just running the Echo for the Zaun because he's the best random Zaun unit we can play here. Scion just for the Bruiser and the additional front lane, and then Auction to fill out the 4 Deadeye. If you have Deadeye +1, you can drop the Auction really for any unit you want. You could drop it for an Invoker right here, or just a good flex unit like Sona. Sona can really just go in any comp, or you could just run the Invoker, something like Shen. You could even run a Taric for the Targon. Make your Urgot and Aphelios a bit tankier because you have a shield, shield, healing. So Taric is a good option as well if you have a Deadeye +1. So keep that in mind. I wouldn't really ever go for 6 Deadeye. I think 6 Deadeye is a bait. It doesn't really do that much for your board. You just have to play too many low quality units anyways, like Auction's already not that good. And then you have to play a Jhin as well, just makes your board way too low quality. In terms of the best legends for this composition, I really like Aurelion Sol. Allows me to get to level 8, start hitting these 2-star 4 costs really quickly. In addition, Vladimir is just really good. Just buff up, your whole team's HP, make Urgot a lot tankier. Just Transfusion plus Battle Ready. Urgot's going to make him really tanky, really difficult to break through, especially if you have a defensive Zaun enhancement. So Vladimir is another great option for this composition as well. In terms of good general augments for this composition, of course, Deadeye +1 is going to be good. Any Freljord augment's going to be +wood. Freljord +1 is really strong. Glacial Breeze is really strong as well. Harm Assist is really good. It's going to allow Aphelios to do a lot more damage because he's usually going to be full HP, do extra damage, and then also heal up the Urgot. Cybernetic Leech is really good on Urgot due to the fact that it'll allow Urgot to heal a bit more, just make him even tankier. Healing Orbs is really good. Urgot's typically going to jump into the middle of the enemy team. As he gets a kill, he's just going to heal back up with the Healing Orbs, so really like that. AD and attack speed augments are really good as well in general. So those are typically going to be the best augments for this composition. The next we have 8 Void Kaisa carry. And now the idea of this composition is you want to be playing it when you have a Void +1, that way you can get the Baron Nashor. You typically only want to be rolling on level 8, this is simply due to the fact that it's going to be very hard to hit Bel'Veth before level 8, so you really want to be making sure that you roll on level 8 for better Bel'Veth odds. Of course, if you see a Bel'Veth on the carousel, no matter what, you should be taking the Bel'Veth, even if it has a bad item on it, just due to how strong the 8 Baron buff is going to be. In terms of itemization here, we typically want to be throwing our AP items on Kaisa. She can use a variety of items. Shojin is really good on her, Archangel is good, Gunblade is good, Hand of Justice is good, Guardbreaker, Giant Slayer are good, Deathcap is good, Scrolled Gauntlet's going to be okay on her, and then Morello is also quite strong on her as well. I typically prefer to put my tank items on Kassadin, so you can really just throw whatever tank items on him, like Warmogs, Vow, Sunfire, Stoneplate, Dragon's Claw, Redemption, Bramble Vest, all those items. That being said, if you start stacking a Cho'Gath very early, so you get a bunch of HP from Cho'Gath kills early on, you can consider stacking the Cho'Gath instead of the Kassadin, but without a bunch of stacks, it's typically better just to stack the Kassadin, and then you can throw any spare AD items on the Bel'Veth right here. In addition, with the Baron Nashor, I typically prefer to just frontline him. A lot of times he'll still die last anyways, even if he's frontline like this. So it's better just to frontline him, that way he can kind of tank for your team a bit. This is typically just what I like to do. Here, I just have the Yasuo to give the challenger with the Kaisa. The Yasuo really could be anything in the game. You could throw in any random unit here, but I do like the Yasuo in this slot, simply just to buff up the Kaisa right here. One other variation of the comp you can do is you can actually start throwing items on the Velkoz here. So you'd probably want something like a Shojin on the Velkoz plus 2 damage items. So maybe something like a Death Cap and something like a Gunblade. Just whatever AP items on the Velkoz. Typically you want mana item plus 2. And then you actually drop the Yasuo, and you're going to be playing another multicaster here. I typically prefer to play Sona. And then as long as we have the +1 on the Void, we should be able to fit in 8 Void this way, and you can potentially go for like a Velkoz 3 and carry him in this comp. One nice thing about this variation is that assuming you have the Void +1, right? So assuming we have Void, let's throw it on the Sona. Let's say you don't hit the Bel'Veth. What you can simply do is drop the Bel'Veth and then just drop one of these other units right here. And you can actually just simply play 4 Multicaster as your level 8 board until you hit the Voids, and then you drop back into the normal Void board we showed earlier. I really only recommend playing this towards this comp if you have the Void +1, simply just due to the fact that you're going to hit your power spikes a lot quicker. You're going to be able to hit like the Rift Herald at level 6, be really strong during the mid game, and then of course you have the potential to cap out with the Baron Nashor. If you're trying to play towards like the Kaisa and you don't have the Void +1, highly recommend just playing towards something like the Ionia Challenger Kaisa comp. That I'm going to talk about later. And if you don't have the Void +1 and you want to play around Velkoz, highly recommend playing around the Multicaster Velkoz comp that I talked about later. You can theoretically try and play some sort of comp without the Void +1, right? If we go back to the units I had prior, I had these in right here. And assuming you don't have the Void +1, what we could theoretically just do in this point, of course, is just stack the Kaisa. And then we could simply just drop one of these random units, say either like the Bel'Veth or the Malzahar, put back in the Yasuo, like so. Maybe we drop like the Malzahar right here. We have one slot open. You could theoretically just play any random good unit. So maybe you just play like a Senna or like a Scion or something like that. This is theoretically a viable build you can go for, but I think you'd rather just be playing something else than something like this. So really only recommend this variation with the Void +1. In terms of the best legend for this composition, it's straight up going to be Earth. It's going to maximize the chance that you get a Void +1, which is needed to play the comp. In terms of good augments to this comp, of course, the Void augments are really good. Harm Assist ends up being quite good as well, due to the fact that Kaisa is going to be healing a lot from it and doing extra damage, and then it can allow your Rift Herald to heal a bit more too. Martyr's quite good. Again, it'll heal up your Rift Herald, because you can't put like items on him. We can't put like a Bloodthirster on the Rift Herald, so Martyr will help heal up the Rift Herald. Sorry, not the Rift Herald. It'll help heal up the Baron Nashor once we have the 8 Void board. And then, of course, AP augments are quite good as well to buff up the Kaisa. One other augment that's really good in this comp as well is going to be All Natural. You have some pretty tanky frontline units, be able to heal things up. I believe the All Natural does work with the Rift Herald or the Baron Nashor, so it should also be able to heal those as well. Next, we have 4 Gunner Zeri. Now, this composition is really good if you can manage to get to this 4 Gunner board right here with the Senna. I wouldn't recommend playing this comp without the Senna. I would honestly just run 3 Gunner if I don't have Senna, just because Tristan is just such a bad unit. She's not going to do anything for your board that you'd actually like low-key rather just run 3 Gunner than the Senna. But yeah, this is the board right here. Idea here is we're just running 4 Gunner, plus Sejuani is just really good for frontline. Lissandra is really good for running the Sejuani, just simply due to the fact that Lissandra is going to enable the 2 Freljord, so just a bit of armor shred on the enemy team. Cyan, of course, just fills things out, and Shen fills out for a complete frontline as well. Items here. Rageblade is one of Zeri's best items, allows her to get her gunner stacks faster and start doing a bunch of damage. She has a bunch of other good items as well, though. Giant Slayer is very good. Gunblade is good. Handed Justice is good. Deathblade is good. Infinity Edge is good. Those are all good options. In addition, Zeeks are very, very powerful in this comp, just to be able to funnel in your Zeri even more, which is part of why Twisted Fate is the best legend for this composition, due to the fact that you can get the guaranteed Zeeks from the Pandora's items and from the Twisted Fate 3rd augment teaming up, which allows you to get a free Zeeks. And then your tank items should be going on your Sejuani. That's where you're putting like your Warmogs, your Protector's Vow, your Redemption, Dragon's Claw, Gargoyle Stoneplate, those type of items on the Sejuani. And that's typically just how the itemization works. You're typically only itemized like funneling the Zeri here. None of the other units in your backline like do a lot of damage. So you really just want to be funneling Zeri and Sejuani, and that's about it. If you don't have the Senna here, you're going to have to fit something in instead of the Senna. You can just run a random frontliner if you'd like to. You know, just a random Jarvan is always completely acceptable. You could also just run a Cassante here. It's going to give you Bastion with a Shen, completely fine. Another thing you can do is you can simply just put in Heimerdinger right here. And then what you can actually do is you can simply just go Echo over the Jinx. And in this scenario, you actually get like a T-Hex. Even if the T-Hex doesn't have like that many stats, this is a completely viable alternative to the board. If you don't have the Sona yet, you can play like this 3 Piltover variation. You can flex like into Piltover Zeri, but I think Piltover Zeri is a lot worse than Gunner Zeri if you don't have like an early Piltover. So this is generally going to be weaker than the 4 Gunner variation I showed earlier. In terms of augments for this composition, I think Harmistist is like low-key the best augment for this comp due to the fact that Zeri just usually sits in the backline, pumps out a lot of damage and heals a bunch, and then just it completely buffs up her damage because you have a really strong frontline with the Sejuani. So Harmistist is very good for this composition. In addition, Pandora's items for more Zeeks is very good. Teaming up for more Zeeks is very good as well. And then Gunner +1 is fantastic. The nice thing about Gunner +1 is it allows you to fit in the 3 Gunner before you have, the 4 Gunner before you have the Sona. The awkward part about Gunner +1 is you actually want to be playing Jace, Zeri, Jinx, and Sona, because Jinx is obviously giving us the Zaun for the Zeri, and you always enhance the Zeri. And Jace is just generally a good unit. He's going to buff the attack speed of Zeri a lot, and then Sona is obviously just like a really good 5 cost. So if you hit Gunner +1, eventually you may end up having to drop one of these units. What you would typically do in that position is simply just drop the Jinx for the Urgot, and you can simply just run Urgot in the front line with like the Gunner crest if you have that. And that's a completely viable supplementary frontliner to this composition. So if you have like a Gunner +1 and you manage to hit the Sona, this is the board I would run. So next we have Piltover Zeri. This is what you're going to want to play if you have an early 3 Piltover. You have it on like stage 2 and you start stacking up the T-Hex and it gets strong later in the game. In terms of itemization, we want to primarily be itemizing Zeri. Rageblade is great for her. Giant Slayer, Gunblade, Deathblade, Infinity Edge, Hand of Justice are all good options as well. We want to be stacking Zeeks on Jace if possible. This is why Twisted Fate is the best legend for this composition, simply due to the fact that you can get a guaranteed Zeeks off of teaming up, and you're much more likely to get Zeeks off of Pandora's items. And then we're going to be wanting to put our tank items on the Sejuani, so any tank items can just go on her. The core of this comp here is going to be Zeri plus Jace for the 2 Gunner. Then we're going to be filling out Echo and Vi, which will give us 3 Piltover and the Zaun. And then Sejuani just fills out Brawler and gives us a strong frontliner. The Cassante, Shen, and Lissandra spots can be flexed out into anything. Theoretically, one thing you can do is drop the Cassante and Shen, and you can simply just play for Gunner. So at this point, we could throw in Sona, and for another Gunner, we could simply just throw in Jinx. At this point, you could also drop the Lissandra, and you can simply just play Urgot and have a board that looks something like this. This is a viable variant as well. You have like the 4 Zaun going on right here. This is a completely viable way to play the comp. In addition, we can play the board from earlier with the Shen and the Cassante. And then if you manage to get a Scion and a Heimerdinger, what you can do is throw in Scion and Heimer, take out Vi, and, you know, just a random frontliner here, probably like Cassante, and play a board that looks something like this. And here, you know, we're still keeping the synergies we have. We still have this Bruiser in, but now we're playing Heimerdinger instead of Vi, so it's just a higher quality unit. We can give like the Zeeks to the Heimerdinger, and this is a solid variation that you can use to cap out your board. Of course, you can still just go 9, throw back in the Cassante. In terms of augments for this composition, any AD or attack speed augments are going to be strong. In addition, healing augments are good, especially Harm Assist, due to the fact that Zeri a lot of times will just heal to full and do a lot of free damage from the Harm Assist, so she really enjoys it. And yeah, really any of the augments that were also good in the previous 4 Gunner Zeri composition will be good in this one as well. So next we have 4 Zaun Zeri plus Urgot. The idea of this composition is we're going to dual carry Zeri plus Urgot with the 4 Zaun. And we're going to be putting the Chemtech enhancements on the Zeri and Urgot. You typically want to put like a tankier enhancement on Urgot, so if it buffs like resistances or the explosion one, you can put on Urgot. And then more damage focused ones you're going to be wanting to put on Zeri. And we're going to first prioritize Zeri itemization. She's going to be the primary damage dealer of this composition. Rageblade is her best item, but Giant Slayer, Infinity Edge, Deathblade, Gunblade, Hand of Justice, Guardbreaker are all good options as well. After the Zeri, we're going to prioritize Urgot items. Urgot really wants 1 healing item. So Bloodthirster is by far the best, and then you want +2. Titans is the best. The best Urgot builds are either double Bloodthirster Titans or Bloodthirster double Titans. There's a few other items you can go as well, though. Hand of Justice is okay as well. You can go AD items on him, but you typically want to be preferring the attack damage items on your Zeri. In addition, you can actually throw random tank items on the Urgot. I'd actually start itemizing the Urgot before the Sejuani. So if I had like a random Warmogs, a lot of times I would just put this on the Urgot before the Sejuani, just because Urgot ends up actually just being a tank. He shields for a lot, and then he happens to do a good bit of damage too. Sejuani will take your spare tank items. The build of this composition here is we're going to be running Jinx, of course, and Echo for the 4 Zaun. And then we're just going to be filling out the 3 Freljord with Lissandra and Ashe, and then Scion for the Bruiser. You can play another Bruiser over the Scion here as well. If you happen to hit a Zaun +1, what you're going to want to do is take this Lissandra and sell her, and simply just play Warwick. And if you have a Zaun +1, you should be able to play 6 Zaun. 6 Zaun is extremely powerful. It's significantly stronger than 4 Zaun. So highly recommend playing around 6 Zaun. Not only do you get 3 enhancements instead of 2, but the enhancements get like 3 times as good sometimes. Being able to play the 6 Zaun is extremely powerful, and you can win the game a lot of the time with the 6 Zaun. In terms of the best legend, Vladimir is just good in Urgot compositions due to the fact that Vladimir is going to enable you to take like Transfusion and Battle Ready, which are just going to make Urgot a lot tankier. Twisted Fate is also pretty good just to guarantee that we get good items for this comp here. In terms of augments, of course, Gunner +1 is pretty solid. You can just put Gunner emblem on Urgot, and then instead of Warwick, simply just run a Gunner. And then you would have 4 Gunner here if you have the Gunner on the Urgot. In addition to that, healing augments are quite good. Urgot plus Zeri both really enjoy healing, so I love healing augments. Attack damage, attack speed augments are of course very good in this comp as well. And then Zaun augments are very good. The one Zaun specific augment, I forget its name, the one that like gives health to the Zaun units isn't that good, but like Zaun +1 is fantastic. So always take Zaun +1 if you're playing this comp. But there's actually a lot of better augments than the one that gives HP to the Zaun units. Although being able to give HP to the Urgot's pretty good, so it might be decent in this variation, although in other Zeri variations it's quite bad. Healing Orbs is also quite good in an Urgot comp because he'll jump into the middle of an enemy team, deal damage, and as he kills enemies, it'll just heal him back to full, and he'll be really tanky, especially if you have like some armor or magic resist from the Zaun amplification. Next we have Built Different. Now you really only want to be playing this comp if you have the Built Different augment. In fact, you should only be playing this if you have the Built Different augment. Which, you know, is the augment that gives your units bonus attack speed and HP if you don't have any traits active, which is why we don't have any traits active on this board. The idea of this composition here is, for the front line, we generally want to be playing Sejuani and Jarvan as many as possible, just due to the fact that they are the best frontliners with Built Different. They don't really need their synergies to be good. They're just good, generally tanky units. Jarvans are going to be casting a lot with the Built Different and just CC the entire enemy board. You can just play as many as you want. I've literally seen people just run 3 Jarvans and 3 Sejuanis as their entire frontline with Built Different, completely viable to do. But right here, I just have Devil Jarvan, Devil Sejuani, and then Nasus. Nasus is pretty good with Built Different as well. He's going to be hitting a lot faster, doing a good amount of damage, and of course, he's a bit tankier. And then it's a bit easier to, you know, hit a Nasus, then hit 3 Sejuanis and 3 Jarvans. Senna here is just a flex spot. This can be anything. You could just throw another carry in the backline or another frontline tank. And in terms of carries, there's a few other options. On this version here, I have Aphelios and Kaisa. But instead of Aphelios, you can easily use Zeri, and she'll essentially just use the exact same items. And instead of Kaisa, you can also simply just use Gwen, because she uses Built Different quite good as well. Of course, if you're running Gwen, you need to be making sure you take out Senna. Same thing with Zeri. Theoretically speaking, Azir is another really good Built Different carry due to the fact that he scales really well off of his attack speed. The problem with Azir in this composition is just the fact that you want to be playing Jarvan because he's so OP with Built Different. So I really don't like Azir in this composition. One other variant you can go is you can go Lux as well. Lux is definitely worse than Gwen and Kaisa in here, but if you hit like a Lux 2 before you hit these guys, you can just throw your AP items on Lux. Really, you can use any AD items. I think Deathblade is the best, but Giant Slayer and Guardbreaker are good as well. You can even go stuff like Gunblade, Hand of Justice, Infinity Edge. I think Rageblade is a bit lower value in this comp just due to the fact that you already have attack speed bonus, and attack speed bonuses don't properly stack on each other. What's going to happen if you have Rageblade on Aphelios is it's going to be scaling off of his base attack speed, not off of the bonus attack speed. So you're losing a good bit of value if you have this attack speed from the Built Different, and then you go Rageblade on the Aphelios. Kaisa here, you just want your AP items, Death Cap, Guardbreaker, Giant Slayer. Archangel's a bit worse because this comp's a bit faster paced, but Archangel's is still fine. Shojin is fine, you don't really need it in this comp because you already have a lot of attack speed, but Shojin's okay as well. Gunblade, Hand of Justice are great to keep her alive. Shiv is a great option as well. And then yeah, that's generally just the comp. Of course, if you're running Gwen, make sure you have a healing item on her, that's about it. In terms of the best legend, the legend doesn't matter a ton simply due to the fact that you're probably taking Built Different at 2-1. That being said, you probably want Ezreal, Ornn, or Aurelion Sol. Ezreal and Ornn are really good just because you want to go multiple carries in this comp. Again, you could theoretically drop the Senna and go Gwen and go like trio carry. So Ezreal and Ornn allowing you to itemize multiple carries is really, really powerful. Aurelion Sol is good because this comp really wants to play around 4 costs. If you see this board right here, it's all 4 costs. So being able to get to level 8 is a huge power spike. So Aurelion Sol being able to enable you to just guaranteed get to 8, of course, is nice. But you're typically taking Built Different at 2-1 anyways. So the power of the legends is definitely a lot weaker. In terms of the best augments for the composition, I think Social Distancing is like the best. You get a bunch of attack speed, you get a bunch of HP, and then you take Social Distancing, you have a bunch of AD and a bunch of AP. You just have infinite stats across the board. I think Harm Assist is really good. Free healing for your carries is just great in general. Battle Ready is just a very strong augment as well. Give you some damage resistance along with your HP. Makes your units actually quite tanky. In addition, Martyr's pretty good. Again, your units are a bit tankier due to the fact that they have built different, so Martyr just enables them to stay a bit tankier. All natural is good because, again, we just have randomly tanky frontliners, right? Typically, a Sedge 1, not very tanky, pretty squishy, but it's not that squishy, but like pretty squishy. But with the build different, she's getting a bunch of free HP, so even if you're throwing like a Sejuani 1 or a Jarvan 1 on the front line, they're decently tanky, so I think all natural is pretty solid with this comp as well. And then Cybernetic Leech, again, for just more healing on your carries, is always good. So next we have 6 Ionia Kaisa plus Yasuo. Now I really only like to play this comp if I have an Ionia emblem. It's just simply due to the fact that your unit quality is going to be pretty low if you don't have an Ionia emblem. And then Ionia emblem on Kaisa is just really powerful. It gives her a ton of attack speed. It's going to allow her to just cast a lot. Idea of this comp here is we're going to be carrying Yasuo plus Kaisa. Kaisa is just going to want to take our AP items. Again, typically we want to have the Ionia emblem on her. If you don't have an Ionia emblem on her, you can just go a third AP item. Good Kaisa items are going to be Deathcap, Gunblade, Hand of Justice. Static Shiv is okay as well. Archangels is okay, but I don't love it because the fights are usually pretty fast. Giant Slayer, Guardbreaker are good as well. Shojin is a bit better if you don't have the Ionia emblem because she's going to have a lot less attack speed. Then you want to be making sure you itemize Yasuo. Yasuo is going to take your AD items. He typically wants a full defensive item, so either Quicksilver or Edge of Night. You can even do both. And then he's going to want 2 other AD items. Titans is really good, Deathblade is really good, Infinity Edge is really good. Giant Slayer and Guardbreaker are acceptable as well. Bloodthirster is okay on Yasuo, but he already gets a good amount of Omnivamp, so I think typically you want to just be going defensive plus 2 damage on your Yasuo, so that way he can hopefully just kill everything. Tank items are going to go on Shen. Shen's your really only like real frontline in this comp, so any tank items you can get, throw them on Shen. You're typically prioritizing the Yasuo and Kaisa items, but you want to make sure you do have some items on your Shen to keep your frontline alive a little bit longer. In terms of the board here, we're of course just playing 6 Ionia here. Ahri is ideal, but you can't always hit her, so just play another Ionia over Ahri until you can hit her. A lot of times in the mid game, you'll be playing 4 challengers, so you'll go Irelia over Ahri, and then you can drop Taric here for a challenger, play some sort of like 6 Ionia, 4 challenger. But the value of 4 challenger does get lessened a bit, just because the unit quality is going to be a bit lower. Again, Irelia plus Warwick's going to be pretty good in the mid game, but if you can drop for like Taric Ahri here, it's going to be a lot better. Taric's of course going to be giving you Invoker and Bastion, helping your frontline survive, and then Ahri's just a really good unit, especially with 6 Ionia. She's going to be casting a lot, mana reaving the enemy frontline. Really powerful. So yeah, there's not really any like too much other variations that I know of for this comp. This is basically just the standard comp right here. In terms of your legend, Urf is of course really good because you have a higher chance of hitting the Ionia emblem, which enables this comp really hard. It's significantly stronger with the Ionia emblem. Ezreal and Ornn are pretty solid as well, just due to the fact that getting more items will allow you to itemize your stuff better. You really want to have 3 items on Yasuo, 3 items on Kaisa, and then ideally like 2 items on the Shen. And then you can even start itemizing Ahri. She's going to be doing a lot. So just being able to itemize a lot of units is really powerful as well. In terms of good augments, Transfusion is pretty good just to keep your team alive a bit longer. They're relatively squishy, so being able to keep stuff like your Yasuo alive longer is very powerful. Combat Caster is good. You're going to have Yasuo going into the enemy team casting bunch, so Combat Caster will help him stay alive longer. Sentinel Spirit is just a great augment for Ionia comps. Any Ionia-based comp will love Sentinel Spirit. It's the Ionia-specific one that gives them a buff every time that they enter into the Spirit form, so love Sentinel Spirit. Healing augments are great. Yasuo really likes extra healing. And then, of course, the Ionia +1 is fantastic as well. So moving on to the 3 cost, we first have Velkoz plus Sona Reroll. Now, this comp is very interesting to me due to the fact that Emily Wang actually hosted a PBE tournament on the Saturday and Sunday before live released, and I played in the tournament, and on the very first day of the tournament, I played this composition 5 out of 6 games, and of my 6 games, I won 4 of them with this composition. I averaged like a 1.83 that day, so this comp is extremely powerful, and I definitely know how to play this one quite well. The idea of this comp here is we're going to be dual carrying Velkoz plus Sona with 4 Multicaster, and then we're just going to have the Taric plus Jarvan plus Swain frontline. Whenever I play this composition, what I like to do is roll a little on level 6 to stabilize, roll a bit on level 7 to hit this board, typically without either the Jarvan or the Taric. You'll typically just play these units, and then you'll a lot of times drop either Jarvan, Taric, or the Lux, depending on what you don't hit, but you always play the 4 Multicaster at level 7, and then you go level 8 on Velkoz 2, Sona 2, and then at level 8, you stay level 8 until you have Velkoz 3 and Sona 3. I actually prefer to go level 8 before I roll for the Velkoz 3, Sona 3. In terms of itemization for this comp, your most important unit is going to be Velkoz. Velkoz really wants a mana item. Blue buff is the best, but Shojin is acceptable as well. And then you want 2 other items. I think Gunblade is good, Guardbreaker is good, Deathcap is good, Jewel Gauntlet is good as well. Giant Slayer is also a good option. I think that generally Archangels isn't very good in this comp due to the fact that the fights are over really quickly. As you can see, the comp doesn't really have much frontline, but it has an insane amount of damage. So you really want to just end fights quickly, so Archangels isn't very good. Next, in terms of itemization, make sure you maybe have at least 1 or 2 frontline items. Spark is going to be really good to allow your units to do more damage, although if you have Shiv, you don't need to go Spark. And then you can just go whatever other frontline items you have. I really just slam whatever I have that's defensive. A lot of times I'll just put the stuff on Swain in the mid game and not sell him, because a lot of times I'll actually go for Swain 3. And of course, if you have Swain 3, you should be keeping the items on him. That being said, sometimes in the late game, I'll hit like another Swain 2. Don't think I can hit Swain 3. And then I'll move the items over to Jarvan 2 because he does use them better than Swain 2 does. Next, we have Sona. All of your spare AP items are going to go on Sona. I think Shojin's her best item due to the fact that it's just going to allow her to cast more. You really want the Sona to be next to the Velkoz like this to give the Velkoz the attack speed bonus. Sona can use whatever other AP items as well. Deathcap is good. You can just throw a Shiv on your Sona as well. She actually uses Rage Blade and Rapid Fire Cannon decently due to the fact that her ult scales off of her attack speed. She's going to give more attack speed to her allies if she has more attack speed. So I really just throw my spare AP items on my Sona like so. One variation people do like to do is they like to go Chalices in this comp. I don't like it as much though. It makes the positioning a bit awkward. But one thing you can do is stack Chalices on Sona and then buff up the Teemo and the Velkoz. One other note is that if you're versus a comp that has a lot of frontline, I discussed this in my positioning video, but you should be moving Velkoz to the middle like this due to the fact that he's going to hit the entire enemy frontline right here and just do a significant amount of damage to their board and just one tap everything. In terms of the best legend for this comp, I think it's by far Veigar. Veigar allows you to just get Jeweled Lotus, which is going to make all your units do a ton of damage, right? Sona does damage, Velkoz does damage, Lux does damage, Taliyah and Teemo even do damage. Your comp just does a ton of damage, so Jeweled Lotus is going to be buffing up everything. So the best legend for this comp is by far Veigar. Of course, if you have Jeweled Lotus, make sure you're not building Jeweled Gauntlet. If you don't have Jeweled Lotus, though, Jeweled Gauntlet is pretty good on Velkoz in this composition. A couple other notes, if you have a Sorcerer +1, there's a few things you can do. The first thing you can do is simply just play into some sort of 6 Sorcerer board and not a 4 Multicaster board. So you can drop the Taliyah and Teemo and just play another Sorcerer. For example, we have Ahri, and then now we can play one other unit in addition to this. So maybe you run like a Shen right here for Bastion, and this is basically just the Sorcerer board we were talking about earlier when we talked about Sorcerer Lux, except now we're carrying the Sona and the Velkoz. As a note, also, you want to be making sure that your Radiant item is going onto the Sona. It's going to buff her up a lot. So that could be your board right there. In addition, if you have a Sorcerer +1, another thing you can do is simply just drop either the Terex or Lux at level 7 and stay level 7 for a while. I don't like that though. I like to be able to go level 8, because if you're dropping Lux, you're not going to be able to get the Radiant item on Sona, and if you're dropping Taric, you're going to be losing a lot of frontline. What I really do like in this composition, though, is Multicaster +1. It allows you to drop Taliyah, and then you can actually fit this board at level 7. So if you have a Multicaster +1, definitely consider staying level 7 and just rolling for Velkoz 3 Sona 3, because your whole board is going to fit at level 7 anyways. But if you do decide to go level 8 with Multicaster +1, of course, you can play a Shen right here. Sorcerer +2 is also extremely broken. You can just play this, the previous board with 6 Sorcerer. It works out quite well. In terms of the best augments, again, I think Jeweled Lotus is by far the best augment for this composition. In addition, generic AP augments are going to be really good as well. Just anything that gives your team more AP is going to be really strong. I think that Perfected Repetition, pretty good. It's going to allow your Sona Velkoz to do more damage as they cast more. In addition, I think Early Education is very, very strong with this comp. If you can get an early Velkoz, he's just going to start stacking a bunch of AP. He's going to kill a lot of stuff in the mid game. By the end of the game, he's basically just going to have a ton of free AP and just kill everything on the enemy team. So next we have Katarina Reroll. Now whenever I play Katarina Reroll, I actually really like to play around the strategist like this. When you play this comp a lot of times though, you'll roll a bit at level 6 to stabilize, then you'll go level 7 and slow roll at level 7 to hit all your 3 stars. Ideally Echo 3 plus Katarina 3. You can theoretically even hit like Swain 3 is perfectly fine, although not as powerful as Katarina or Echo. When I play this, I really do like to play around this 4 strategist though. The reasoning is I don't think 4 rogue does that much for Katarina. 4 rogue is very good in the mid game. So like if you roll down at level 6 and you hit Viego plus Zed, you can play 4 rogue and it's going to be really strong at that point. But as the game progresses, going into 4 strategist is just going to allow you to scale a lot better. And then I think 6 Noxus is a pretty undertuned trait. So we typically just throw in the 3 Noxus here for the Katarina with the Swain and the Darius. One other important note to make sure that you do is put Katarina and Echo in the back 2 rows, not the front 2 rows, simply due to the fact that if you have strategist in, you want them to be getting the AP and not the HP, so make sure they're in the back 2 rows. In terms of itemization, the most important items are going to be going on Katarina, as she's your main carry. You really want Katarina to have 1 healing item, so Gunblade, Hand of Justice, and Bloodthirster are all really good. I'd say in that order from best to worst, but all of them are acceptable. And then you want +2. I think Titans is her next best item, makes her tankier and makes her do a lot more damage. But Deathcap is really good. Guardbreaker is really good. Giant Slayer and Jewel Gauntlet are also acceptable as well. So any of those are good options for your Katarina items. Echo's typically just going to be taking Chalices and Zeeks because you want to buff up your Katarina as much as possible. So if you can get those Chalices and Zeeks, it's going to be really good. He can take spare AP items as well, though. Jarvan's going to be your tank item holder typically, unless you manage to get to like a Swain 3. Vow is definitely Jarvan's best item, but you can throw whatever other tank items on him that you have as well. Should be fine. But if you get to like a Swain 3, you should of course be putting tank items on the Swain. Azir's another interesting one that you can actually put items onto. If you get like a random Rageblade, feel free to throw it on Azir. With the 4 Strategist, he should be doing quite a bit of damage. He should not be a priority with items though, but if you get to an Azir 2, he can help supplement a lot of your damage late game and help you cap out even higher. In terms of the positioning here, of course, we just have Katarina Echo on the back 2 rows. I typically like Katarina to be on the same side as the enemy carry. A lot of times what I'll do is have Katarina not directly on the edge, so I'll do something like this and have it over here. That way she's not directly on the corner. I think her targeting ends up working out pretty well like this. Katarina positioning, I typically just like on the same side as the enemy carry. That way she has a higher chance to rogue proc into their backline and hit the enemy carry. So typically just one of these 2 hexes right here, or of course the reverse. I typically like one of these 2 hexes right here for my Katarina. I don't love her in this hex right here. In terms of the best legends for this composition, I think that Veigar is very good due to the fact that you can get Jeweled Lotus for your Katarina, Echo as well. I think Silver Jeweled Lotus is extremely powerful in this comp because you can just funnel the Katarina. Twisted Fate's also really good to guarantee you get multiple chalices for this comp. You get best in slot Katarina. You can go like double chalice, triple chalice on the Echo, buff up your Katarina a ton, so Twisted Fate is another good option. In terms of the best augments for this composition, the Rogue augments are quite good. Vampiric Blades, a bit more healing for your units. Rogue +1 is also quite good. If you go Rogue +1, you can simply just drop the Teemo here and play 4 Rogue. That's completely acceptable. Your standard AP augments such as Jeweled Lotus and Magic Wand are just going to be good to buff up your Katarina damage as much as possible. Healing Orbs is good. Katarina's going to be in the backline. It's going to heal her up, so it's going to be really strong. Strategist +1, really powerful in this composition. I really like healing augments as well, so Cybernetic Leech is really powerful due to the fact that it's going to give Katarina a bit more HP and then also allow her to just heal a bunch more. So if you're sitting here with like a Gunblade plus Cybernetic Leech, she's just going to be healing like 40% of the damage she does or something like that. It's going to be really strong. The next we have Garen Reroll. Now the idea of this comp here is we want to stack as much attack speed on Garen as possible because his spin actually scales really well with his attack speed. His spin actually procs Rageblade and then it just lasts a lot longer when you have a lot of attack speed on the Garen and does a lot more damage. So we want to be stacking as much attack speed on Garen as possible, which means we want to be going Rageblade, and then we want Bloodthirster due to the fact that he'll be able to heal off of it and be able to tank through enemies, especially with the Juggernaut buff. Then you want to be going as many Zeeks as possible. This means that you should really be playing Garen from Twisted Fate due to the fact that you can actually force multiple Zeeks on your board, whereas with another legend, of course, you wouldn't be able to force multiple Zeeks. The idea of this comp here is we're just going to be running the Garen with these 2 items. The third item is going to be the Demacia, so we're going to run the 3 Demacia, and then we're just going to put in as many Juggernaut units as possible. That's really all there is to it. You're going to want to slow roll at level 7 for Garen 3. You can potentially go Warwick 3, Darius 3 as well, and then after that, you can just start pushing levels and get into 6 Juggernaut if possible. In terms of the best augments, Juggernaut +1 is going to be really good, allow you to hit 6 Juggernaut really quickly. In addition, healing items are pretty good, allow Garen to heal a bit more. Cybernetic Leech is great for that. Adrenaline Rush is great. Of course, it's just going to buff up your Juggernauts, allow Garen to do more damage. And then, of course, Pandora's items and teaming up just to allow you to stack as many Zeeks as possible. So next we have Reksai Reroll. The idea of this comp is we're going to be going level 7 and rolling for Reksai 3. And we're going to be playing around the Bruisers with 3 Void. You typically want to be playing 6 Bruiser. 6 Bruiser is going to be better than like 6 Void. But you can't always necessarily hit a Scion or don't necessarily have a Bruiser +1. If you have a Bruiser +1, just always play 6 Bruiser, of course. You should be able to hit it very easily. If you don't have a Bruiser +1, what you can do is simply drop the Scion and the Renekton. And you can simply just play 3 more Void units. And the Lysandra as well. You just play 3 more Void units. So you play like Malzahar, Kassadin, and the Velkoz. And then assuming you drop the Scion, Renekton, Lysandra, that would allow you to have 6 Void in, which is a decent hold until you get into the 6 Bruiser. Once you hit Reksai 3, of course, level 7, you're going to start pushing levels. In terms of itemization, we're going to want to go Bloodthirster on Reksai for the healing, plus the shield. And then you want to go Titans as well. Reksai makes Reksai a lot tankier and buffs her damage quite a bit. And then you can go third item here as well. Titans, you can just go double Titans. It's probably the best build. You can also go Quicksilver as your third item, or you can go damage items such as Deathblade or Infinity Edge is also acceptable for the third item. You're going to be throwing whatever AP items you have on the Kaisa. Merle is probably her best one to help support the Reksai because she's kind of a secondary carry in this composition. But standard AP items such as Shojin, Archangel's Deathcap, Guardbreaker, Giant, Slayer are all good options as well. Tank items will typically either go on Cho'Gath or Sejuani. If you have a Cho'Gath 3, you should be seeing tank items on him. And if you have tank items on Cho'Gath early and you just have like a stacked Cho'Gath with a bunch of HP, you can keep tank items on him. But otherwise, you want to be throwing tank items on your Sejuani. That's just going to be stuff like Warmog's, Bramble, Vow, Dragon's Claw, Stoneplate, Redemption, and the like Sunfire as well. Redemption's really good in this comp simply due to the fact that all your bruisers are tanky. So if you put the redemption between 2 bruisers, you can heal up 2 of the bruisers at once in addition to the bruiser that's on. And so it's just a lot of value. You also get the AoE reduction. If you have a Void +1, what you can simply do is drop a lot of the extra brawlers and simply just go into 8 Void. So for instance, let's say I have a Void +1. Let's just throw it on the Sejuani, for example, right here. We can drop the extra bruisers and the Lissandra and simply just play all the Void units. And your board will look something like this. And you'll have 8 Void with the Baron Nashor. Pretty good variation as well. Sometimes when you have 8 Void with this, you'll actually just push level 8 with Reksai 2. And then you try and go level 9 and actually transfer Reksai items to Bel'Veth 2. Because Bel'Veth 2 is better than Reksai 2, and they do use the same items. So a very common line is just go 8 for the Baron, then go 9 and transition into Bel'Veth carry. This is really only what you do if you have the Void +1. Otherwise, you should be trying to play towards 6 Bruiser, especially if you have the Bruiser +1. The best legend for this composition is definitely going to be Vladimir. The comp scales pretty well off of HP due to the fact that Bruisers scale well off of HP. In addition to that, Ascension's really good. You're really tanky with the 6 Bruiser, so you're going to get to the Ascension proc. And then also Battle Ready is just a good augment in general. Urf is theoretically pretty good for high odds at Void +1 or Bruiser +1, but it's going to be a lot less reliable than Vladimir. In terms of the best augments, the Brawler augments are going to be really good. Titanic Strength is going to buff up your damage a lot. Make sure you're playing 6 Bruiser if you're playing that. Void +1, of course, is fantastic. Stable Evolution is good because you're going to be going Reksai 3. It's going to buff her up quite a bit. In addition, healing augments are always going to be good. Buff up your Reksai healing a lot more. Stuff like Cybernetic Leech is going to be good. All natural is really good in Bruisers due to the fact that it's going to affect all of them and give them bonus healing. So all natural is just fantastic in a Bruiser-heavy composition because they're all just going to be naturally relatively tanky. In addition, Gargantuan Resolve is actually good in this comp. Gargantuan Resolve is a little unreliable for a lot of compositions simply due to the fact that 35 stacks for the armor and MR on Titans actually makes it worse in some cases. Because a lot of units want to get the armor and magic resist immediately after 25 stacks. Reksai, though, with 6 Bruiser is going to be tanky enough that she'll always get to the 35 stacks, so Gargantuan Resolve is quite good in this composition as well. Next, we have Invoker Reroll, and one of the really nice things about this comp is it stabilizes really hard at level 6 and level 7. When you're playing this comp, what you want to do is you want to slow roll at level 7 until you have Karma 3 and then potentially Lissandra 3 as well. The core of this composition here is going to be Karma plus Lissandra plus Soraka plus Shen for our 4 Invoker. Until you hit Shen, you will typically just be running Galio. Then to fill out the composition, we have Taric, Jarvan, and Swain just for additional frontline right here. And then I have filling this out with Ahri for Ionia. Theoretically, you can drop the Swain if you want to as well and run the Ionia unit right here. But I do like to have 4 frontliners with this composition, so at level 7, I typically play something like these 7 and then throw in the Ahri at level 8 ideally. Of course, if you manage to go level 8 and you can get a Rise, what you can simply do is throw in a Rise, drop out the Ahri, drop out the Swain, and put back in Galio and play 6 Invokers like this. If you have an Invoker +1, of course, you can just play this board at level 7. And this is going to be your typical standard board at level 7. Of course, you could theoretically drop this Jarvan for like Swain, but Jarvan is just a strong unit, so if you get a Jarvan 2, you're probably playing Jarvan 2. But your board could look something like this at level 7, and this is going to be completely acceptable. You could even drop the Taric and play Jarvan over the Taric as well. In terms of items here, we're first going to prioritize Karma items. She really just wants AP items. She doesn't really want any mana items, so no Shojin or blue buff, because with the Invoker, you're already going to be getting a lot of free mana. Gunblade is acceptable on her, though. Deathcap is really good, Archangels is really good, Giant Slayer, Guardbreaker are really good as well. The fights end up lasting a pretty decent amount of time, so Archangels does work pretty well here. Dual Gauntlet is also another good option. In terms of other items, you want to make sure you have at least 2 tank items. Shen, again, is the normal unit to put the tank items on. That being said, if you can manage to 3-star one of these other frontliners, which all of these are valid to go for, you would put the tank items on them instead. Any tank items are going to be good. Warmugs is good, Stoneplate's good, Vows good, Redemption's good. Bramble and Dragonclaw are good as well. Spark is going to be really good in this comp to enable more damage. If you have a Shiv, you can just simply put it on Soraka. And then ideally, you can also go for Chalices. You put the Chalices on Lissandra. This allows her to walk up so you're not clumping your backline together like this. And then it buffs your Karma, Lissandra, and Soraka. All of them use the AP really well. Also gives some mana for the Lissandra, allows her to cast really quickly and just start getting kills at the beginning of the fight super easily. In terms of the best legends for this composition, I think Vladimir and Veigar are going to be the best. Transfusion is going to help your comp live quite a bit, allow you to get more procs off of the Invoker and do a lot of damage that way. Veigar also is really good for the Jeweled Lotus, allow your units just do a lot of damage up front, so both of those are very good options as well. In terms of good augments for this composition, any augment that gives AP is going to be good, and then augments that make you tankier, such as Transfusion, are also good, because this comp wants to have both a stable frontline and a stable backline. It's really not just put into one or the other, you want to have both. In addition, I think that Loving Invocation is one of the best augments for the composition. Loving Invocation is the one time you actually go for blue buff on Karma, just due to the fact that it's going to print more AP for your team, because with Loving Invocation, every time she casts, your whole team's going to gain AP. So I think blue buff's fine with Loving Invocation. If you have Loving Invocation, I would try and just play 6 Invoker. You're going to be casting a lot, doing a lot of damage that way. In addition, I think that early education is quite good. If you have a Karma from your 2-1 orb, you can go early education, start stacking a bunch of AP on her, and she's going to be doing a ton of damage by the end of the fight. Next, we have 6 Ionia, Karma plus Yasuo. The idea of this composition is you can stabilize really hard at level 6 or level 7 by carrying Karma, playing around Ionia units, and then going level 7, level 8, and playing around a dual carry of Karma plus Yasuo. Yasuo is typically going to be your late game carry, but Karma is your mid game carry. But you just keep your AP items on the Karma and put your AD items on the Yasuo. One important thing to note is that if you really want to cap out this comp and can maybe get to an Ahri too, of course you're just going to want to move these Karma items over to the Ahri and start carrying the Ahri, but Karma can hold your items for the mid game. With this composition of here, of course, we're just going to be playing the 6 Ionia units. Of course, if you don't have Ahri, you can just play another Ionia over her. So Karma, Ahri, Yasuo, Shen, and then set Irelia for the 6 Ionia. And then to fill this out, I have Taric to give Bastion, and then I have Jarvan just because he's a good generic frontliner. This can realistically be any frontliner, however. For instance, you can simply just go Aatrox over him. It's going to give Juggernaut with set. Aatrox is a pretty good unit as well. So a board like this would also fit. In terms of items here, blue buff is actually really good in this version because you're not running more than 2 Invoker. So blue buff is going to be really good on Karma, and then you typically want 2 damage items as well. Jewel Gauntlet, Deathcap Giant, Slayer, Guardbreaker, Archangels are all good options. Then we're going to want to be itemizing Yasuo. Yasuo really wants a defensive item, so either Quicksilver or Edge of Night is going to be ideal, so you want one of those 2. And then you typically want 2 damage items. Infinity Edge, Titans, Deathblade are going to be your best options. Guardbreaker and Giant Slayer are okay, but they're not as good. You could theoretically go double defensive. Something like Quicksilver plus Edge of Night is also acceptable, but I do think the double damage build is better. You can even go like double Titans is completely fine. Something like Bloodthirster is okay on Yasuo. That being said, with 6 Ionia, he is going to have a decent amount of healing as long as he goes into the spirit form, he's going to be healing back up. But something like Bloodthirster is okay on the Yasuo as well. Tank items are just going to go on your Shen. Make sure you have at least a couple tank items, that way your frontline doesn't just fall apart immediately. But any generic tank items on Shen will work, stuff like Bramble, Stoneplate, Redemption, Vow, that type of stuff. So this is really just the composition right here. There's not that much in the way of variations. That being said, of course, depending on your AP items, you could potentially flex into the Yasuo and Kaisa variation I talked about earlier. So definitely keep that in mind if you're sitting here with items that also work on Kaisa. Stuff like blue buff, though, isn't going to work on Kaisa, so if you're sitting here with blue buff Karma, probably better to stay in this Karma carry right here, but if you have other items like Gunblade, Shojin, you may prefer to play around Kaisa instead. So moving on to the 2 costs, the first composition I have is Taliyah Reroll. Now the idea of this composition here is we're going to be going for Poppy 4-star, and her knockups are going to allow Taliyah's boulders to do a lot of damage, because whenever a unit gets knocked up, Taliyah's going to throw a boulder at them, so whenever you go Poppy 4-star, she's going to be knocking up a lot of units, and we're going to be throwing boulders at her. As an aside, there is a variation of Taliyah Reroll where you basically go as many knockup units as possible, playing like Set and Yasuo and stuff. That being said, I do think that version is a bit less consistent than this one. This one seems a lot stronger to me whenever I see it, just due to the fact that you're playing a higher quality board in general. The other variation just plays a lot of random bad units together, whereas this version just ends up being a stronger board. The idea of this board here is, of course, we're going to be first itemizing the Taliyah. You want a mana item, so either Shojin or blue buff, and then typically 2 damage items. So stuff like Deathcap, Archangels, Jewel Gauntlet, Guardbreaker, Giant Slayer are all going to be good. And then for Poppy here, we're going to want to be running 2 tank items on Poppy, and we'll typically just get a Demacia item on Poppy if possible. That being said, you won't always be running 3 Demacia, because of course we could take this board right here, and we could simply play a Demacia unit over the Azir for 3 Demacia, or we could be playing a Demacia unit at level 8 for 3 Demacia, so sometimes you'll be going a Demacia item on the Poppy. That being said, you won't always go Demacia item on the Poppy, and you may just go 3 tank items on the Poppy, because one variation at level 8 is we drop the Azir, and then you just put in Velkoz plus Sona. And in this scenario right here, you're of course going to have 4 Multicaster in, and then you're going to have in the 3 Demacia for the Poppy. Whenever you play this composition, you're going to want to roll to about 30 gold at 3-1, and then slow roll at level 5 until you have Poppy 3, plus either Maokai 3 or Tristana 3. I think Maokai 3 is a bit better, but you'll take either of the ones you get. The reason is we need 3 3-star units, and so then once you have the Poppy 3 plus one of these 2, you can simply go to level 6 and roll for Taliyah 3, and then once you have Taliyah 3, you're going to power spike really hard with the Poppy 3. She's going to be knocking up a lot of stuff, doing a lot of damage. This is typically just going to be your board right here for the composition. This is your ideal level 8 board. Level 6 board, of course, is going to look something like this. You could just play like a Swain instead of the Jarvan. And then level 7 here, you could put in Azir for more Strategist. You could put in Lux for Demacia. Or you could even just put in the Lux for Demacia early and then throw back in the Velkoz at level 8. In terms of the best legend for this composition, I think Lee Sin is quite good for this. On a Roll is just a really good augment. The other Lee Sin augments aren't that good, but On a Roll is really good if you're trying to reroll a lot of 1-costs, due to the fact that you can get a lot of free shot procs and just hit all your units really quickly. In addition, Veigar's pretty good as well, just buffing up your Taliyah damage for free with Jeweled Lotus, so those are both good augments. In terms of good augments for this composition, AP augments such as Jeweled Lotus Magic Wand are going to be really good. Perfected Repetition is just good, you're playing Multicasters. In addition, Strategist +1 is going to be strong, buff up your Taliyah damage. Multicaster +1 also very good, allows you to very easily fit in for Multicaster at level 7. So it's a little hard to make it to level 8 with this comp sometimes, but if you have Multicaster +1, this board here fits perfectly at level 7. Early Education can be decent if you can start getting some kills with Taliyah, although I do think Early Education is a bit better in some other compositions as well. In addition, Infusion is good. Allow your Taliyah to cast more, allow your Poppy to cast more. You just get more knockups, more damage is going to be good. I think Combat Caster is also pretty decent with your Poppy. She'll just shield herself every time she ults, which should give you a bit more frontline. Next, we have Zed Reroll. Now, the idea of this comp is we're going to be slow rolling at level 6 for Zed 3, plus potentially Kled 3, and then we're going to go level 7 and try and get out the Kled 3 plus Katarina 3, and maybe even the Darius 3 or the Set 3 as well. There's multiple variations of this composition. There's some where you play like 5 Slayer. There's some where you play 4 Rogue. This is the variation I like the most because I think it fits the most naturally. You can just fit in good synergies here, and you can get the 3 Ionia for the Zed. That being said, it is completely valid to go for a variation where you drop the Set and the Yasuo and just play extra Slayer units. So instead of the Set and the Yasuo, you can simply just be playing Kayle and Aatrox right here. And this would be a fine variation, is just to play the 5 Slayer. With this comp right here, what you need to make sure is that you have a healing item on Zed. Bloodthirst is the best, but Hand of Justice is good as well. And then you want 2 damage items. If you're playing this 3 Ionia version, you want to make sure you have Infinity Edge due to the fact that his Ionia proc is going to give him crit chance and crit damage, which is only going to be good if you can also have spell crit along with him with the Infinity Edge. Otherwise, Titans is one of his best items. And then you can also go any other damage items such as Deathblade, Giant Slayer, and Guardbreaker are all acceptable as well. Next, we like to put spare 80 items or Zeeks on the Kled. Zeeks is really good on Kled due to the fact that it's going to give attack speed to the Zed, the Kled, and the Katarina, and do a bunch. You can also simply throw random 80 items on the Kled as well, such as Titans, Bloodthirster, and the like. And then for Katarina right here, she'll take all our spare AP items. If you want to know about Katarina itemization, go check out the Katarina section. And then any spare tank items you can probably throw on the Set in this composition, especially if you get to a Set 3. Your level 6 board is typically just going to be the Zed, Kled, Katarina, Set, Darius, plus an Ionia unit, and then once you go level 7, you can throw in this Gwen right here, and once you go level 8, you can simply just throw in another Slayer, being the Aatrox, and play a board like so. In terms of the positioning here, I have everything just fully on the front row. You actually want to proc the Rogue as quickly as possible, so Zed just goes on the back line, and he doesn't get stuck on their front line, so you typically just want the Zed in the front row like so. In terms of the best legend for this, I think that Twisted Fate is pretty good for this, simply due to the fact that you can guarantee multiple Zeeks for this comp, and guarantee that you get best items on the Zed. In terms of the best augments for this composition, Slayer +1 is really good, Rogue +1 is really good, AD augments are also really good, any Rogue augments also going to be really good, Cybernetic Leech is going to be great because Zed's going to be in the front line taking a lot of damage, so getting more healing for him is really good. Healing Orbs does the same thing, so that's going to be strong as well. Know Your Enemy I think is pretty good as well, because if you can Rogue proc into the backline and get an immediate kill onto a unit, you're just going to start doing a lot more damage onto the enemy team. Pandora's Items is also a fantastic option due to the fact that you can stack multiple Zeeks and just buff up your Zed as much as possible. Next we have Teemo Reroll. When you're playing this comp, what you're going to do is slow roll at level 6 for Teemo 3 plus Swain 3 plus either Poppy 3 or Sona 3. The reason you want this is you want to make sure that you have 3 3-star units to proc the Yordle to guarantee that you get the Teemo 3 right here. And then we're just going to be filling out the composition with Jarvan and Kled. Jarvan's great because it's giving us Demacia and another Strategist, and then Kled here is going to be giving us the Yordle. Once we start pushing levels, we can of course just throw in Azir simply like this at the next level. And then if we manage to, we can put in 4 Multicaster. You can theoretically drop the Jarvan at level 7 and play 4 Multicaster that way, although the Jarvan does give a lot of value. But you can simply just play Velkoz plus the Taliyah and buff up the Teemo damage a lot this way. In terms of itemization for this composition, you're going to want to first prioritize Teemo items. You really want a mana item, blue buff is the best, and then you want +2. Deathcap is really good, Gunblade is really good. I think that Giant Slayer and Guardbreaker are also quite good as well. Jewel Gauntlet's pretty solid as well. I don't think Archangel is that great because the fights end up being relatively quick with this composition. So those are typically your Teemo items. You'll typically put your tank items on Swain due to the fact that you're usually hitting Swain 3 because you're rolling at the same interval as Teemo. Theoretically, there are worlds where you hit Poppy 3 plus Sona 3, and in that scenario, you can maybe itemize the Poppy if you'd like to and play around some like Bastion units. You could put in, like a Shen to buff up the Poppy with the Bastion if you manage to get to that. But typically you're going to be hitting the Swain 3 and just itemizing Swain 3 because he's a really good unit. He's going to take your tank items. Spark is going to be really good on him because it's going to buff up your Teemo damage. But then other tank items are going to be really good in general. Stoneplate, Vow, Warmogs, Dragon's Claw, Bramble Vest are all going to be really good. And then you're going to be throwing your spare AP items on Sona. Shojin is her best item by far. It's going to buff the attack speed of your entire team. In addition, another thing you can do is throw Chalices on the Sona in this composition and put her next to Teemo, buff him up with the attack speed, and you're going to buff up his AP with the Chalices. You typically want to be throwing the Demacia item on the Sona, though, in this version. One thing to note is that it's typically best to put Teemo in the middle. This is just due to the fact that he's going to be hitting in an AoE, and if he's in the middle of the board, he's going to be hitting the most units. So Teemo in the middle, like so, is going to be ideal. In terms of the best legends for this composition, I think Lee Sin is pretty good due to the fact that you can get on a roll, which is just really good with any Yordle composition. Allows you to hit your 3 stars quicker. In addition, I think Veigar is really good as well. Being able to just buff up your damage with a guaranteed Jewel Lotus is extremely, extremely powerful. Your team is going to do a lot of damage that way. In terms of the best augments, of course, the generic AP augments such as Jewel Lotus Magic Wand are going to be really good. Perfected Repetition, of course, is going to be great in a multicaster comp. As you cast more, especially with this blue buff, you're going to be getting more AP. I think that Multicaster +1 is obviously fantastic. It's going to allow you to fit in for Multicaster really quickly. You can simply just throw in the Velkoz like so, and this can simply just be your level 7 board. You don't even have to go level 8 to play the 4 Multicaster, because, again, normally you would have to drop the Jarvan if you want to play 4 Multicaster at level 7, because you're not dropping Kled, because you need Teemo 4. Just make sure that the Teemo is the one getting the Yordle buff if you're putting items on Poppy, by the way. In addition, early education is actually quite good. If you get an early Teemo, he can start getting a lot of kills and just stack up a bunch of AP throughout the game and start doing big damage at the end of the game. Next, we have Soraka plus Galio Reroll. With this composition, what you're going to want to do is go level 6 and slow roll at level 6 for Soraka 3 plus Galio 3. Then you can go level 7 and go for Karma 3 plus potentially Taric 3 as well. In terms of this board here, we're going to want to first be prioritizing Soraka items. She really wants Shojin plus AP. She uses raw AP the best due to the fact that it's going to buff her heal and her damage, so Archangels and Deathcap are going to be her best items. That being said, if you already have an Archangels or a Deathcap, it is okay to go with an item such as Giant Slayer, Guard Breaker, or Jewel Gauntlet that only buffs her damage and not her heal. Just keep in mind that you really want Shojin plus 1 raw AP item. Then you want to make sure that you have tank items on your Galio. Stoneplate, Warmogs, Redemption, Vow, Dragon's Claw are all going to be really good options, Bramble Vest as well. And then you're going to be throwing your spare AP items on your Karma and potentially 3-starring her to cap out your board. In terms of the best of the board right here, I have Shen, of course, for the 4 Invoker. That being said, if you don't have a Shen, you can play Lissandra in this spot as well. Should be perfectly fine. Taric is really good here because Soraka is going to be playing a lot around heal. Galio has a heal as well. Shen has shields. So Taric is just really good to give us the Targan. In this board right here, you can play Aphelios for 3 Targan as well. One other thing you can do, though, is if you start pushing levels and you can get Rise plus Lissandra, you can drop the Aphelios and play 6 Invoker like so. This is really strong as well. This is probably stronger than the Shen, but the 3 Targan is pretty good, so just keep in mind that. You do really want to make sure, though, that you do end up getting Karma items later on in the game. It's just due to the fact that Soraka 3 starts falling off later. Around late stage 4, early stage 5, Soraka stops doing a lot of the work for the team, and Karma kind of has to pick up her slack. So make sure that you do end up getting Karma items, or else you're just going to fall off a cliff and not be able to kill any units. In terms of the best legends, I think Vladimir and Veigar are really good. Just the combat stats they give is strong. Jewel Lotus is really good to buff up your Soraka and Karma damage. In addition, Vladimir is really good. Just makes your comp a lot tankier, especially if you're sitting here with like a Galio 3. Ascension is going to be really good. Battle Ready is just good in general. And then Transfusion is going to be good to allow you to live longer. There's more HP for the team. This team scales pretty well off of the HP from it. AP augments in general are going to be really good. In addition, Loving Invocation, of course, is fantastic in any Invoker board. Just print a ton of AP for your whole team. Stellacorn's Blessing should be really strong here. You get a bunch of healing from a bunch of different units. Soraka's going to be healing, Taric's going to be shielding, Shen's going to be shielding, Galio's going to be healing. So if you have Stellacorn's Blessing, which gives you attack speed every time you heal or shield when you have the Targan in, it's going to be giving your team a bunch of attack speed, let them cast a lot more. In addition, Targan +1 is going to be really good. Invoker +1 is going to be really good, right? If you have Invoker +1, you can play a board like this really easily. And this should fit very nicely even at something like level 6. In addition, early education is actually pretty good as well. If you have like a Karma early, you can go early education, start stacking a bunch of free AP on Soraka, and then once you get Karma in, the Karma and the Soraka are both going to be stacking AP. So early education is definitely a viable option with this comp as well. One other note is that if you have Winds of War, which is the Galio hero augment for this set, this is going to be the best comp for this. So if you have that Galio augment and you want to reroll for Galio, I think you should be playing towards this 4 Invoker Soraka plus Galio reroll as opposed to another variation. Next, we have Warwick Kalista reroll. This is the comp you're going to want to be playing if you have a bunch of early Warwicks and want to reroll him. So what you're going to do with this composition is you're going to go level 6 at 3-2 typically, and slow roll for Warwick 3 at that point. And then after you hit Warwick 3, you can potentially hit set 3 at the same time. You're going to want to start pushing levels, go to level 8. And once you get to level 8, you're going to want to be putting in 4 Juggernaut, so typically like Nasus and Aatrox, but you can also do Darius and Garen if you don't have these guys yet, and play a board that looks something like this with the 4 Challenger, 4 Juggernaut. And then at level 8, you can potentially go for the Kalista 3 as well. In terms of itemization for this comp, we're first going to prioritize the Warwick items. Warwick really wants Quicksilver due to the fact that it's going to enable him to continue auto-attacking. The thing is, Warwick isn't that tanky if he's not being able to auto, because he's going to heal based off the amount of times he autos. So Quicksilver is going to be really good for him in general. It's also going to allow him to CC more the more he is able to cast. Rageblade is really good on him as well. Again, allows him to heal more, allows him to cast more, CC more. Titans is really good, allows him to do a bit more damage, and makes him a good bit tankier. You can also just put random tank items on him as well. Stuff like Warmogs is going to be fine on Warwick. He can take those like generic tank items, because he's actually more so a tank in this comp than the carry. You shouldn't be looking for Warwick to do your damage dealing in this comp past like stage 3. He's going to carry you really hard in stage 3 on the damage front. But once you get later in the game, you really want to start looking towards Kalista and Yasuo items and having them carry you. In terms of the next itemization here, we're going to typically be going for Kalista items. She really likes Rageblade as her first item, and then you can go +2. She has a bunch of stuff that can work really well. Gunblade is good, Deathcap is good, Jewel Gauntlet is good, Giant Slayer is good, Guardbreaker is good. Those are all good examples of good items. You can actually go AD Kalista. I've seen people go like Deathblade Last Whisper on their Kalista or Infinity Edge on the Kalista. I personally think the AP version's a bit better, but you actually can stack AD items on the Kalista, so that is one option. Of course, with this variation, though, with my spare AD items, I would recommend going them on the Yasuo. So you're really going to want like one defensive item, so either Quicksilver or Edge of Night in that build right there. And then you're typically going to want 2 damage items, so something like a Titans is going to be really good. Even like double Titans is going to be best you can go on Yasuo. Infinity Edge, Deathblade are also really good. Giant Slayer and Guardbreaker are okay as well. So something like this on the Yasuo. Of course, we're fitting in the 3 Ionia here with the Irelia plus the set. We're running Echo here to give a Chemtech enhancement to the Warwick. You typically want to be giving it to the Warwick. If the Chemtech enhancement really sucks, maybe you don't run the Echo. But honestly, if the Chemtech enhancement isn't good for Warwick, wouldn't recommend running this composition. You're typically going to want to go for something that makes the Warwick a bit tankier though. So any of the Chemtech enhancements that enhance Warwick's tankiness are going to be good for this composition. This is typically your board right here. Theoretically, you could drop out of the Ionia later on and play Kaisa over Irelia, and then just play something over set. One variation is to drop the Irelia and the set, and instead go Kaisa, and start itemizing the Kaisa, and then you can actually go Gwen as well. This is one other variation of this, and you'll typically also start itemizing the Kaisa, and put AP items on her. So this is one variation you can play. In this scenario, you would probably drop the Echo for another Juggernaut. So you would typically just put back in the set, like so. This is another variation you can do. You can especially do this if you get like a Kaisa 2, is a strong version. I think you really want the 4 Juggernaut later on though to make sure the front line is super tanky. I think if you're trying to play 3 Ionia in this variation, it's a bit hard to fit unless you randomly have like an Ionia +1, so I wouldn't recommend it. Make sure you have that 4 Juggernaut in once you get to level 8, so that way your front line doesn't just vanish immediately. Something like this is another valid variation you can go at level 8. In terms of the best legend for this composition, I think it's probably just Vladimir. Vladimir is going to be really good with challengers due to the fact that they already have an innate good amount of damage, but they want some more tankiness. So Vladimir is going to be giving you Transfusion, of course, which is going to keep your units a lot tankier. And then Battle Ready is just a good augment in general. Ascension's probably not that great with this composition, but it's not the worst, especially if you have scaling damage with Rageblade on Kalista and Warwick, so that is a potential option. In terms of other good augments for this composition, Juggernaut +1's of course going to be fantastic. You can put the Juggernaut +1 on the Yasuo. In that scenario, of course, you can fit in that 4 Juggernaut earlier at level 7. You could even play a variation that looks something like this, and instead drop the Gwen for another Juggernaut unit, so let's say Darius. And then, of course, you could even go back to the 3 Ionia variation if you want, assuming you have the Juggernaut on the Yasuo. You could, of course, then just go into the Irelia instead of Kaisa, and funnel this Yasuo even more. Healing augments are also going to be good in general. Healing Orbs going to be good to heal up your Warwick. Harm Assist is going to be really good, allow your Kalista to do more damage. And then Challenger +1 is another good option for this composition. If you have Challenger +1, what you're going to want to do is go back to the composition we had previously. So you're going to be playing something like this with the Echo. And if you have a Challenger +1, what you probably can just do is drop the Echo and simply just play Kaisa right here. And this would be your board with a Challenger +1. And this is going to be a strong variation. You can go this 6 challenger for Juggernaut. Should give you a lot of damage and a lot of tankiness. So next we have Jhin Irelia Reroll. Now when you play this composition, what you're going to want to be doing is you're going to want to roll to about 30 gold at 3-1 at level 4. And then you want to go to level 5 and start slow rolling for the Jhin 3 plus Irelia 3. Once you get Jhin 3, Irelia 3, you're going to want to start pushing levels. Typically, you're going to be hitting the Jhin 3 plus Irelia 3, itemizing them. Set 3 is another good option if you hit him. If you manage to get Set 3, I would also recommend going for Warwick 3 as well. And you can run Set plus Warwick, and then drop this Aphelios and play a Kaisa like this at level 8. So this is a strong variation at level 8 that you can play if you manage to hit the Set 3. Because if you get Set 3, you can actually put the items on the set instead of the Irelia. And he's going to be really, really tanky, CC the enemy team for a very long time, and do a lot of work. Otherwise, I like to just have this Aphelios in for Deadeye with Jhin, just allow you to do a bit more damage. At level 5, what you're going to want to be doing is you're going to want to be running Irelia, Set, and Jhin. This is going to give you your 3 Ionia. Then what you're going to want to typically be doing is putting in a bit more frontline, so I like Warwick here to give Juggernaut with the set. And then for the last slot, you can either throw in a Deadeye, so something like an Ashe, or you can simply just throw in a Samira to give you 4 Challenger, like so. And this would be a good level 5 board, is these units on the right. And then as you push levels, you're going to want to start putting in Ionia units. And once you're putting in these Ionia units, you'll get to 6 Ionia at level 7. And you want to put that in immediately, because it's going to buff up your Jhin and your Irelia a ton. In terms of items for this comp, Jin's best item is definitely going to be Rageblade. Rageblade is going to allow him to auto-attack a lot more, doing a lot more damage that way. And it's also going to allow him to ult a lot more, because his ult cost is really high, and every time he ults, it's basically a kill. In terms of his next items, Deathblade is probably his best one. Giant Slayer, Runons are also really good. Guardbreaker is really good as well. Infinity Edge I don't love, just due to the fact that being able to crit with his spell is not that impactful in this composition. Just simply due to the fact that a Jhin 3 is typically going to be one-shotting with his spell anyways, so being able to spell crit isn't the biggest deal. Hand of Justice is another acceptable item on Jhin as well. In terms of Irelia atomization, I really like to go full tank Irelia. So stuff like Warmogs, Dragonclaw, Bramble Vest, Stoneplate, Redemption, and Vow are really good on her. I like to just go 3 tank items, make her as tanky as possible. One thing to note is that the Ionia buff on Irelia does give her more armor and magic resistance. What this is going to mean that it is a bit higher value to go something like a Warmogs, that's going to be giving her HP, than going something like a Bramble Vest or a Stoneplate that's going to be giving flat armor and magic resistance, just because she's already gaining the magic resistance from the Ionia. You can still go stuff like Bramble and Dragonclaw, though it's still good, but it is going to be a bit lower value than something like a Warmogs. And then we can throw spare AD items on the Yasuo. Late game, he can kind of duo carry with the Jhin, or you can even throw spare AP items on the Karma. Or ideally, if you can get to Ahri, you can run Ahri in this composition over this Karma slot and throw AP items on her. That is completely acceptable as well. One other note with this composition is that if you have Ionia +1, really, really strong, you can start playing towards the Ionia Kaisa variation I talked about earlier, and you can just throw in 4 Challenger like so, throwing in Kaisa and Warwick like this, and this can simply be a board that you're playing towards right here. And then, of course, with the Ionia +1, you can drop out of this Karma and play a board like so. You can play your Deadeye over the Karma slot if you have this Ionia spat. So this is a really good variation with Ionia +1. If you have Ionia +2, once you get to like level 9, you can start putting in 9 Ionia. It's basically the Exodia for this composition. If you have 9 Ionia, the likelihood that you win the game is extremely, extremely high, especially if you can get Ionia Kaisa with 9 Ionia. She's going to do a bunch of damage. If you want to know more about how to play around Ionia Kaisa, make sure to just check out the Ionia Kaisa plus Yasuo section. In terms of the best legend for this composition, I think Lee Sin is really good. Lee Sin is just good for this comp in general due to the fact that on a roll is going to allow you to just hit your Irelia 3 and Jhin 3 really quickly. You want to hit them as early as possible, so being able to have on a roll from Lee Sin his Silver Augment could allow you to just hit them really quickly, really just good with 1-cost rerolls. In terms of the best augments for this composition, I think Sentinel Spirit is by far the best. It buffs up your units whenever they go into Spirit form with the Ionia buff, so Sentinel Spirit is just fantastic for this composition. It's going to give your Jhin free attack speed. In addition, Combat Caster is quite good. Irelia casts a lot, so it's just going to give her a lot of free shield. Healing augments are pretty solid in general. Harm Assist is good. Jin's going to do a lot of damage with his ultimate, so Harm Assist is going to let him do some extra true damage. In addition, I think that any AD and attack speed augment, of course, is just going to be good. Like, you are my sword, and you have my bow, just good in general. Ionia +1, as I already talked about, is fantastic for this composition as well. The next we have Kayle Reroll. Now the idea of this composition here is we're going to be re-rolling for Kayle 3-star, rolling to about 30 gold at 3-1 at level 4, and then slow rolling about 50 gold at level 5 until we hit Kayle 3-star. We're also going to go for Poppy 3-star and Maokai 3-star. This will enable us to have 3 3-stars on our board, which will allow Poppy to turn into a 4-star. We're going to be 4-starring the Poppy here. And the build here is going to be 5 Demacia with 3 Yordle. So what we're going to be doing is giving the Radiant item from Demacia to the Poppy and the Kayle. So we really only want to be putting 2 items on each of them. In terms of itemization, you're going to be looking for Rageblade +1 on Kayle. Kayle just wants a Rageblade, 1 other item. Giant Slayer is good, Guardbreaker is good, Death Cap is good. Archangel should also be good as well. Jewel Gauntlet is somewhat acceptable as well. In addition to that, Kayle actually does not need to have Magic Resist Shred, so you don't need Spark or Shiv in this comp. This is due to the fact that her wave is going to naturally MR Shred anyways, so it's really not needed for this composition. Poppy just wants 2 tank items. Warmogs is good, Stoneplate is good, Bramble's good, Dragon Claw is good, Redemption is good. You can theoretically even go like Sunfire, although it's not going to be quite as tanky. What you're going to be doing is at level 5, you're simply going to be playing Kayle, and then you're going to be playing Poppy and Maokai, and then you're going to be playing one other Demacia unit. So any other Demacia, maybe just like Sona like this. And this will be the core of your level 5, and then you can simply just throw in a Slayer. So this could be your level 5 board right here, the Poppy, Maokai, Kled, Kayle, Sona. Should give you 3 Demacia. You can give the Demacia buff to your Kayle so she can start killing stuff. You have the Maokai for frontline and the Kled for Slayer in this position, although this could be something besides the Kled. And then of course you're going to stay level 5 till you have Maokai, Poppy, and Kayle all 3-starred. Then play the board I showed previously, and then just start filling out the rest of the board. At level 6, you want to put in Teemo, so that way you can get the 4-star Poppy, and then you want to put in Jarvan and Lux to fill out the 5 Demacia at the next 2 levels. In terms of the best legend for this composition, I think Lee Sin is really good. Honor Roll is just really good for 1-cost reroll compositions, so being able to hit that is going to be really strong for this. In terms of the best augments for this composition outside of legends, I think any AP augment's going to be pretty good, so stuff like Magic Wand or Jewel Lotus is going to be pretty strong to buff up your Kayle. In addition, Demacia +1 is going to be really strong. You can fit in 5 Demacia pretty easily at level 7, because you just play the Teemo plus the Jarvan, and this is your level 7 board right here, and you'd have the 5 Demacia, assuming you have the Demacia +1. Of course, Petricite Shackles is very good, because it buffs up your Demacia unit's damage. Our carry here is going to be the Kayle. Next, we have Viego Reroll. When you play this composition, what you're going to want to do is roll to about 30 gold at 3-1 level 4, then go level 5 and slow roll above 50 gold until you hit your Viego 3, and then you can start pushing levels. The Maokai 3 here isn't that important. If you manage to hit him while you're getting the Viego, great, but you should be starting to push levels as soon as you hit the Viego 3. What you're then going to do is just push levels. Then you have the option at level 7 going for Katarina 3, Echo 3 as well. So that is one option, or you can simply just push levels and get the board in that I have right here. Of course, this is a level 8 board right here, but you could theoretically just not play the Shen and reroll for Echo 3, Katarina 3 at level 7. That is another option, just probably depends on the amount of Katarinas and Echoes you have. In terms of itemization for this composition, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get a Rage Blade on Viego. He starts stacking damage on auto attack, so being able to get Rage Blade is going to allow him to cast more and allow him to auto attack more. He also really wants a healing item. Bloodthirster, Gunblade, and Hand of Justice are all really good. I think Hand of Justice is the worst, but Bloodthirster and Gunblade are both really good. And then you want a third item here that gives us some damage. Titans is really good due to the fact that Titans is going to make us a bit tankier, but you could also just go with a raw damage item as well. Something like a Death Cap should be acceptable, like a Jewel Gauntlet as well, Giant Slayer, etc. Then in terms of the rest of your itemizations, if you can manage to get a Katarina 3, you can start itemizing the Katarina like you would in Katarina Reroll, so go check that out if you want to see her itemization. Otherwise, you want to start stacking Zeeks and Chalices. Typically, they're going to be put on the Echo. So you go Zeeks and Chalice on the Echo like this, just to buff up your Viego as much as possible. And as you push levels, you're going to be putting in 4 Rogue, and you're going to be putting in 4 Shadow Isles. The Shen here just fills out with Bastion as a nice filler. At level 5, you're typically just going to be playing a Void like this with the 4 Rogue. 4 Rogue is extremely strong in the mid game. You're going to be win streaking a lot during stage 3 if you have this Viego 3 with 4 Rogue. You typically just want to position something like this, that way all your units can actually walk up. I really like Viego on the side right here. You typically want Viego to be on the same side as the enemy carry, so he can potentially rogue proc into them and kill them. But I like him a little protected like this because I like him to be able to ramp up a little bit, as opposed to something like Zed where you want him to just instantaneously jump into the backline. In terms of the best legends for this composition, I think that Lee Sin is pretty good if you can get on a roll. Being able to just hit Maokai 3, Viego 3 really quickly is going to be super impactful. In addition, Twisted Fate is also really good to guarantee that you get best in slot Viego. In addition to that, you will also be able to get a bunch of Chalices and Zeeks to just buff up your Viego even further. So Twisted Fate is quite good in that regard too. In terms of the best augments, the Rogue augments are very good. Vampiric Blades just gives you more free healing. In addition, the AP augments are also going to be really good, so like Magic Wand and Jeweled Lotus. Rogue +1 is of course very good. If you have Rogue +1, you can simply just drop the Zed and play 4 Rogue that way. In addition, Shadow Isles +1 is pretty good. Will allow you to get in that 4 Shadow Isles even earlier. And then you can potentially even drop the Shen and play 6 Shadow Isles once you hit a Sona. So Shadow Isles +1 is another decent option for this composition. And for the final comp for today, we're going to have Tristana Reroll. So what you're going to want to do is roll to about 30 gold at 3-1, and then slow roll above 50 gold at level 5 until you hit your units. Your level 5 board is going to look something like this. You're going for Tristana 3, Maokai 3, Poppy 3. Again, you need all 3 of these 3-starred, simply due to the fact that if you don't have all 3 of them 3-starred, you won't be able to turn the Poppy into a 4-star or the Tristana into a 4-star either. And then I'm just running Galio here and Kayle for the Demacia. This is a bit better than running the Yordle here, but as soon as you hit these all 3-star, you should be putting in Yordle to get that 4-star Poppy. Typically, it's better to prioritize 4-star Poppy than 4-star Tristana. A 4-star Tristana is nice, but that you really only get that late game when you get the Heimerdinger. So what you're really going to want to do is go for the 4-star Poppy, and then just run 3-star Tristana because she still does a decent amount of damage. Of course, you want to be giving the Demacia item to the Poppy. In terms of itemization right here, we're going to want tank items on Poppy. So Warmogs is really good, Stoneplate's really good. In addition to this, Redemption is quite good, Bramble Vest is good, Dragon's Claw is good as well, Vow is also strong. And then we want to go AD items on Tristana. Rageblade is going to be probably her best item, and in addition to that, Last Whisper is good, Infinity Edge is good, Deathblade is good, Rudon's Hurricane is good, Giant Slayer is good, and Guardbreaker is good as well. To fill out the composition, what we're going to be doing then is transitioning into Jarvan and Sona, just because they're better units than this Kayle and this Galio. Theoretically, in some scenarios, you might 3-star this Kayle, and then you opt to just run the Kayle the rest of the game, your 3-star units for probably the Sona, and in that case, you could drop the Maokai for Roshan. But typically, you'll be 3-starring the Poppy, Maokai, and Tristana. And then as you push levels, you're going to put in and replace Jarvan Sona here. You can oftentimes run Gunner in the mid game if you need a level 7. My level 7 when I'm playing this composition will just be this. I then throw in another Yordle, so typically like Kled or just Teemo here. And then I'm going to throw in Jace for Gunner. Buff up the Tristana like this. And of course start replacing this Galio Kayle, like I said. And then as soon as you get Heimerdinger, what you want to do is put in 5 Yordle. That way you can get Tristana 3 plus Poppy 3 and buff up the Tristana damage even more. And that's how you're going to be able to cap out your board. In terms of the best legend for this composition, it's definitely going to be Lee Sin. Honor Roll is just really good for 1-cost rerolls. We really want to hit 3-star 1-costs, so having Honor Roll is going to be very powerful. Being able to just reroll more of those 1-costs, very good. I would not recommend taking the Lee Sin Prismatic. I think the Lee Sin Gold is okay, but not great. Trade Sector is like okay for this comp, but I don't love it. But being able to hit Honor Roll is fantastic for this comp. I typically don't play this comp unless I have really strong direction for it, but I would consider Honor Roll really strong direction, so I'm happy to play this if I have Honor Roll. In terms of the other best augments, Unstable Yordle Delivery is another really good direction for this composition. Playing this with Unstable Yordle Delivery will just give you a bunch of free Yordles. You'll be able to hit your 3-stars even faster. In addition, AD and attack speed augments are really good, so you have my bow and you have my sword are strong, and then Harm Assist is good to buff up Tristana's damage even more. Theoretically, Demacia +1 is also quite good. If you don't have the Heimerdinger and you have Demacia +1, you could drop the Heimer and the Kled, and then it should be really, really easy to fit in 5 Demacia at level 7, like this. So Demacia +1 would be quite good. You could play a board like this. If you don't manage to hit the Heimerdinger, of course, another option would be playing 5 Demacia at level 8, because you can buff up the Jarvan and the Poppy and have Jarvan as a nice secondary tank. I will actually just opt to play around the Jace. In addition to this, Gunner +1 should actually be pretty good as well to be able to buff up your Tristana. Because again, the captive board we showed here didn't take Gunner +1 at all. So it didn't take any Gunners at all, just because we want to be playing the 5 Yordle. So the fact that with a Gunner +1 playing the captive board, we can still get Gunner on the Tristana is really powerful. And then of course, if we have a Gunner +1 and we simply don't have a Heimerdinger, what we can simply do is just play Jace and Zeri at level 8, and now we have 4 Gunner on Tristana, and this should be pretty strong for our level 8 until we can manage to get to a Heimerdinger. If you made it to the end, I want to thank you so much for watching. This whole thing has been a bunch of work. It's taken me hours and hours to collect all these comps, practice them, know how to play them, in addition to just making them on the boards and making sure I have the right information regarding them. And then it took hours and hours to edit and record this video. So thank you so much for watching. Feel free to subscribe if you want to see more of my content. I'm definitely going to be releasing a lot of stuff this set. In a couple days, I will be releasing a video giving a meta snapshot as to what's doing really well a couple days into the very first patch. So make sure to subscribe if that's something you're interested in seeing, and I will be giving updates to different comps throughout the set as well. If any new comps come out, I'll make sure to send them to you guys. If I have any updates to better ways to play these compositions, I'll update in future videos as well, so make sure to stay tuned for all of that.